Hello, welcome back to House of R. We are in a post-Project Hail Mary world. I'm Joanna Robinson. Joining me today, she's dearer to me than Rocky himself. It is Mallory Rubin. Hey, Mal, how you doing?
Sheesh, what praise. What an honor. Rocky's on my mind still, every minute of every day. I miss him. It's sad not to be able to look forward to seeing Project Hail Mary for the first time, but I'm glad that the entire galaxy universe is celebrating Rocky together. What a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. You were very bullish on how the film would do, and you were right. How does it feel to be so right?
It just feels great to know that everybody is going to meet Rocky. Honestly.
Yeah.
I'm just so happy for everyone.
Movies.
And seeing movies.
In the theater.
Exactly.
If you haven't already, please do check out our conversation with Andy Weir that we had at the end of our deep dive last week. I think it was a delightful conversation. Andy is just the best. Yes. Today we are doing sort of a grab bag. We've got a Daredevil Born Again check-in. We are catching up with the Dune Part 3 trailer and the Spider-Man trailer. And we will get to all of that right after this. Before we get into the sort of grab bag of stuff that we have today, just a couple programming reminders. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but I will say that there is a Darth Maul show happening, and that is something we will be checking in on.
That's right.
The way in which we're checking in on is still a slight question mark, but we're really excited about the Darth Maul animated show that's coming out. So we'll be checking in on that. We've also got another Christopher Nolan movie that we're checking in on. It is approximately a Memento anniversary.
That's right.
So
25 years.
We have tattooed somewhere on our body to check in on Memento. One of my favorite Nolan movies. So if you have never seen Memento, do yourself a favor as we continue to journey toward the Odyssey. And also, despite the fact that the reboot has been canceled, we will be continuing with our Buffy rewatch because Mallory Rubin is nothing if not a completist, and she has watched season 4. So we will be doing Buffy season 4 part 1 is something we've got on the horizon.
Can't wait.
And then, as I mentioned today, Daredevil Born Again check-in, Spidey trailer, Dune 3 trailer, plus a quick book spoiler section.
Right at the very end.
For the Dune 3 trailer, right at the very end. So if you don't want to know anything about Dune Messiah, you can peace out. We will let you know. But that's coming. That's why we're arranging it in that order. And so the book spoilers at the very end of the podcast, so you can check out before we get to that. There's a lot going on, both today and in general, Mallory Rubin. How can folks keep track of everything? What do you think?
Oh, I would just recommend you follow the pod. Follow House of R on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch full video episodes of House of R on Spotify. Incredible stuff. And you can, of course, watch full video episodes of House of R and the Midnight Boys Pew Pew on the Ringerverse YouTube channel. Follow us on social media because we have new House of R handles on Instagram and TikTok at House of R Pod. Thrilling, exciting. We're having fun. Join us. And then, of course, send us your emails. The inbox is always open. hobbitsanddragons@gmail.com. Are you looking forward to spending April 6th watching Maul Shadow Lord as I am on my husband's birthday? Let us know. Let us know if you're excited. If you have thoughts on Memento or any other Nolan movie that we haven't gotten to yet, keep the tenant emails coming. We're going to get to it eventually, right? Let us know what you are thinking about Daredevil so far and anything else that's on your mind this spring. Send us your emails. We'd love to hear from the bad babies.
We haven't gotten a lot of emails, Mallory, just for you about Rocky merch. So just so you know, the bad babies are keeping tabs on all the options for Rocky merch, and they are letting you know. So
I was relieved after missing the shoulder buddy to just see that there's a plush. It's exciting and no surprise, but it is a thrill. I enjoyed completing my Lego over the weekend. It's wonderful. It's very satisfying to twirl it and watch the ship move. Just a good treat. And I'm loving my popcorn buckets. I haven't used them for popcorn. I'm just looking at them. And I'm enjoying that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to mention before we dive into Daredevil Born Again?
No, I don't think so. Let's do it, man. Back in Hell's Kitchen-ish.
Let's suit up and go back to Hell's Kitchen-ish. All right, so it's season 2, episode 1 is what we're checking in on. Even though they're kind of calling it episode 10 as well, it's a little confusing the way this is a season 2, but it's all part of this sort of born again mass entity that they have created. This episode is written by Dario Scatapane, directed by Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson. These are sort of like the main creative folks on this show. In general, this is an 8-episode weekly drop, except for next week, which is 2 episodes for some reason. We don't really know why, but there you are. And then at the end of it all, as they've just announced, the Punisher special is coming on May 12th.
Exciting.
And though I feel like we're a little behind on the Spidey trailer, I'm kind of excited that we're talking about Daredevil into the Spidey trailer today because there's so much Daredevil in the Spidey trailer. I kind of feel like it's all going to be by the MCU design, sort of one big thing. We've got Daredevil into Punisher, and then Punisher playing such a large role in Spidey, plus some other bits and bobs from Daredevil in the Spidey trailer. So we're going to talk about all of that. But it's just like, it feels like serendipity that we're talking about all of it, or marketing design, if you choose.
Why not both?
But how are you feeling to be back near-ish Hell's Kitchen so soon, Mallory Rubin?
In general, in terms of having a subsequent season of a show quickly and not having to wait 2.5, 3 years between installments, I think that's great. I mean, it's increasingly rare in the current streaming era to be able to return to a character set and a plot line and a storyline with a quickness. So, conceptually, that's nice. I think we were obviously, the two of us, this podcast, maybe MCU fans collectively, a little mixed on season 1 of Daredevil Born Again after, anticipating it so ferociously that we revisited every cherished moment from the original Netflix series. And so, I will say I'm excited to see where the season goes. I am very hopeful because of these ties to the Punisher special and then into Spidey that things will really feel toward the end of the season like they're humming. I've not watched beyond this first episode premiere, so I have no idea where the season is going. But the premiere I thought was okay, and notably not different feeling from season 1 in the way that I was expecting based on sort of all of the discussion around the reshaping that had happened with season 1 and how season 2 was going to feel like maybe the show that we were supposed to get. That's not my impression 1 episode in. That said, there are things inside of this episode that excite me. A mention of a Jess. I'm like, okay, Jessica Jones, give it to me now. Give it to me when. I don't want to wait. We've seen Foggy in the trailer. Foggy, not here in this first episode. Would I have loved whatever flashback or however that's going to be structured? Immediately, I would have. I anticipate that and I look forward to it. We're the leading Daniel Blake and Buck Cashman enthusiasts, so of course it's great to be back with our guys.
I was thinking about you a lot with every Daniel Blake scene. I was like, Mallory loves this guy. And then, of course, Buck Cashman, my guy.
My guy, Daniel Blake, just breaking out the Kith Nick skier could not have been more on brand. I'm like, I saw that drop when it hit. I saw that drop. So yeah, I'm curious to see how much of the beginning of season 2 feels like a relic of season 1 because we are still in the process of kind of recalibrating and resetting, and it will actually feel different toward the end of the season. I don't know. We're not going to be covering it weekly as we have some shows, but we will check in, here and there across the season. We'll certainly check in at the end of the season, if not sooner. But yeah, I hope it ends with a bang and sends us into the future of Daredevil with a lot of anticipation.
I'm unwilling to promise and underdeliver, so I don't know what we will be doing with Daredevil for the rest of the season. But I will say this. I actually liked the first episode way more than I thought I would because I was pretty down on the last season. Mixed down is where I would put myself. And then I sort of dragged my heels on checking in on episode 1, and I talked to a bunch of our pals who had screeners, and everyone else seemed pretty down. So I was like, oh God, I'm just not going to like this. And then I watched it and I was like, you know what? It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I actually quite enjoyed a lot of it. And then when I rewatched it, I think I liked it even more. I've only watched this first episode, but on the second time through, I liked it even more. And while I was sort of hoping that some various plot threads that I felt weren't working in the first season would be sort of, snipped out right away at the beginning of the season, that is not the case. And so, but there's a shape of something that I think they're doing a bit better job. We've got new characters. We've got a ton. There were so many characters in season 1.
Yes.
And they're still all here pretty much.
Yeah.
And then we're adding new characters. Matthew Lillard is here. We'll talk about it. We're adding new storylines. But there's a way, contrary to season 1, I feel like inside of this episode, I feel like I can see a shape of something that makes it all feel like it's more tightly woven together. like when they say things like the vigilante trials are coming, and that's across like 3 different storylines, and it's a legal case, and that's exciting. So like there are things that make me cautiously optimistic, more so than I thought I would be for this season. Not even just the Jessica Jones of it all. And perhaps that's because this episode ended with an incredible moment for my guy, Dex, aka Bullseye, my fave, my hottest fave. And I've been told by people who have seen more of the season that this is like, there's some great stuff for Dex this season. So like that makes me really excited too. So
I mean, look,
everyone can wait around for Jessica Jones. I'm here for the problematic white man who maybe I can fix.
Let's be honest.
We can only be ourselves.
Ending on Bullseye, you can fix him. And featuring multiple Wig Watch TM with Joanna Robinson TM sequences. Not only did we get to see Karen Page out in the world in wigs more than once, but we got I thought, deeply disturbing, harrowing, nightmare fuel-inducing close-up of the creepy mannequins on which the wigs rested.
Well, that was like a classic, a very classic Moorhead and Benson, like, hey, and then we're cut to Kingpin and his bald head. And doesn't it remind you of the bald head we just came from? They love that like image matching shit. But here's my favorite thing about Karen in her new wig-centric life.
Yeah.
She has decided, and I think rightly so, that it's not enough to just slap a wig on it. She needs about like 10 pounds of eyeliner to go with it. And that's just really working for me. And I'm excited to talk about Karen and the rest. So let's start with this. Again, this is not a deep dive. We're just going to sprint through sort of like our light impressions here. So like, we've got a ton of characters, a ton of storylines, as I mentioned. Let's talk about some older storylines that we're most excited to return to. You've already mentioned your guy, Daniel Blake. Daniel Blake and BB and their whole relationship.
I love them.
We've got these like new pastel color propaganda BB report videos and this sort of anonymous-esque anti-Mayor Kingpin videos that go with it, right? So the BB report thing is back, which I wasn't sure they would use that device again, but they are doubling down on it. And I was like, okay, that's a choice, but here we are, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to zip through this, then let's go back through and talk about what you're most excited about. Matt and Karen's relationship. Here we are, just like bing, bam, boom. We're into it. You love Karen Page. You're so excited. Jack Duquesne, the swordsman himself. We do love Tony Dalton. We're so excited.
Yes.
My beloved Dex continually out for revenge against Vanessa. The thinly veiled ICE storyline, aka Powell and the AVTF run amok.
Yes.
Cherry, private investigator, and Vanessa, Queen Pin. I do think it's interesting that when I assembled these storylines, which is not entirely comprehensive, but mostly, there isn't like really a Kingpin story. He's just sort of everywhere, which is perhaps by design, but he's just sort of lightly everywhere. So of all these things that I've listed here, what were you, renowned Karen Page lover, what were you most excited for to be back with?
Boy, I think let me start with what I'm least excited about. That is Heather. I just like.
Well, I'm putting her under like new storyline because she's got the PTSD thing, which feels like
is it new if she's flashing back to the Muse attacks from season 1? I don't know. That's like part of what I was like, man, we're just sort of right back where we were. But fine, I'll maintain some patience and we'll see if it feels fresh. Always happy to be back with Daniel and Buck. I do like the Daniel BB dynamic, and I thought it was interesting to hear Karen push BB on like what her actual connection to Daniel is, and this like we're manipulators, and the easiest people to manipulate are manipulators conversation, right? So this kind of warning, be careful, but also like, hey, how do you feel about this person? And okay, you're saying like, no, not like that, but stay frosty, these things can get complicated. Like, I am interested in how that dynamic evolves because obviously BB is using Daniel for information. He is clearly head over heels smitten. Like, that's undeniable. And will she start to develop more of a deep and abiding fondness for him as the season goes or not? I don't know.
He grows on you, Mallory. He grows on you.
I mean, the apartment does anything in Daredevil Born Again have anything even remotely resembling the charm of the original Loft? No, still no. Even again, going to the
aggressively no.
Murdoch and McDuffie law firm and seeing the kind of taunt of the brick and the arch shape of the window really took me back to that season 1 feeling of missing the Loft. But
I have a note for McDuffie and Associates.
Yeah.
If business is so bad that Dea Hochberg can come in and sort of just like piss all over you or attempt to, I would recommend downsizing your office suites. If business is tough and you're working on pro bono cases and you're letting your heart be your guide, your virtue be your guide.
Yes.
You can no longer afford
those
the white
digs.
shoe, Ally McBeal, glass and brick, gorgeous suite of offices. That's what I have to say about that. So
it's a good real estate note, as is always the case in shows set in New York, where there is almost always a real estate note. I liked seeing McDuffie, talk her shit to Hochberg. That was satisfying and fun. On the BB front, I was frankly astonished that the season opened with the BB report, because that was one of the things that gave me the clearest, like, oh, maybe this isn't going to be as different right away as we thought it would be, kind of feelings that was like a little bit hard, honestly, to shake off even over the course of the rest of the episode. But I'm interested in where that's going and the connection to Ben and the original series and like our real emotion, like deep emotional fondness and connection to those characters and those storylines in that moment in time with Daredevil on TV. I am curious, like, what is your theory for those anonymous-esque Mayor Kingpin videos? Do you think, because I think there are kind of two theories so far, right? It seems like the internet is asking, is this connected to Mr. Charles in some way and whatever is going on with that character and that? I just assume it's BB, and that
I think it's BB.
Yeah, and especially
that person is like smaller stature.
Yes,
whoever's in that suit with the gloves and the mask is like a smaller person.
Yeah,
it's not Matthew Lillard. I'll tell you that much
for sure.
now,
and like this, just even the sequencing.
I've seen Matthew Lillard in a Scream mask and a robe, but I know what his frame looks like when it's masked. It's not that.
It's not that. I think also just the sequencing of that stretch of the episode where we're like, going from the BB report into this, which mentions and directly alludes to the BB report and this idea of her complicity in this thing. That would be a good way, if it is in fact BB, to like maintain a degree or manufacture a degree of cover and separation. And then we cut right to her. So it felt very intentional to like point toward that direction. But also just in the previously on, one of the things that we were reminded of was her saying at the end of last season, not everything I write is under my name, right? So reminding us that she is out there generating commentary in a different form. And so I think that this is BB, and I am interested to see where that goes.
I am deeply uninterested in BB and Daniel Blake in general. Yeah. Though I will say that like the move of I hired you cleaners, cash at me, like
great
Venmo
stuff.
Me $500.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Amazing.
If you
like
two
wakes up and like,
are trying to court a man-child as a source, I think hiring a cleaners but then say "fuck you, pay me" is a great move.
That's incredible.
I have to give it to like the vigilante trials, which I did have sort of under new storylines than it is, but I think making Jack Duquesne exciting. The main focus, at least so far. I mean, it's vigilante trials, so I think he's not going to be obviously the only one. There were a lot of people in cages, right? But like him as sort of our central focus here, I think was really, really smart and made me excited. But yeah, like when Cherry is important in this episode, or McDuffie's, I was like, oh, we're still doing Cherry. Oh, we're still doing McDuffie. We're not trimming anyone around the perimeter. We're just keeping everyone sort of in the mix, which is like I don't know. It's an interesting sort of like, fuck you. No, we didn't get it totally wrong. We're gonna fix it, but we're not gonna completely revamp it. We heard you. Karen Page is here. She's here in earnest.
Yeah.
She is the love interest. It is so clear.
Yeah.
But we're keeping the law firm. We're keeping Cherry. We're keeping BB. We're keeping Daniel. We're keeping Buck Cashman. Sheila is still here. Like all of it's still in the mix. So
yes. To be clear, BB is not BB and Daniel are not the thing I'm most interested in. I'm just like it going kind of through that. I hope that can evolve into something more interesting than it was in season 1, if that is in fact her, and we get to kind of see how she's basically seeking to pursue her vengeance for the way that her family was wronged. My answer is also Jack and Dex. Like I think kind of undeniably those are charismatic figures who we enjoy watching on screen, like kind of at the most basic level. And, to your point about like, hey, a legal drama in a Daredevil show. Like there's an aspect of that just feels right. And hearing even some of the things that Matt said across this episode, we're going to get to some of this later about how much of it was connected to maybe his Catholicism and his like a spiritual outlook on the world, but also like in the moments where he said things across this episode about needing to believe in the system, that is a return to a aspect of foggy-driven belief and conviction that Matt has not always been able to maintain a grasp of. And so the vigilante trials as a way to like root Matt in a sacred thing to him and to this most precious relationship in his past that is now gone is I'm excited to see that.
The Church of the Courtroom. Yeah, the Church of the Courtroom, I think, is like a really potentially interesting thing. I mean, again, we'll see how it pays off. But Matt Murdock currently missing, presumed dead, all of this sort of stuff like that. So like, will he be at all like as Matt Murdock lawyer involved in the vigilante trials? I certainly hope so. I'm continually hoping that Daredevil gets Matt Murdock lawyer right. It doesn't always do it, but like I want it to get it right. So let's zip through again. This is a brief check-in, so I'm just going to zip through the new storylines and we can talk about the things that most intrigue us here. So as you mentioned, Matt and Karen on the run-ish, sort of. Dr. Heather Glenn and her PTSD. Karen Page and her many wigs, Matthew Lillard, CIA, and a very present signet ring.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Albany's interest in Fisk, as represented for now by Lieutenant Governor Juan Gomez and Attorney General Steve Rudd. The wreck of the Northern Star. Mm-hmm. An underground railroad operating out of the back of the Aegean Gardens.
Yes.
And the vigilante trials, which we already mentioned. I gotta say, I love Matthew Lillard and I love late career Matthew Lillard. So I just thought he was like, from the moment he shows up and like dunks his cell phone in the whiskey, and then just sort of ambles into the office calling everyone by their first name while he talks about, his hero is, I thought was a great addition to the show. What is Mr. Charles on your mind? What are you most excited about in terms of these new storylines?
Yeah, Mr. Charles is really interesting. I was also like freeze frame zooming in on the signet ring, which felt very deliberately multiple times, but most notably of all of the first moment that we glimpse his character at the bar, presented in the frame for us to consider and observe. I love a guy who is willing to make the trip because he needs the miles. Great little miles. I'll just go. I need the miles. It's a wonderful opening note. Dunking the burner. He had just like a litany of empty glasses behind that beverage that he befouled with the burner. So you're like, okay, the passion for lunch, many drinks deep. This guy is a mover and a shaker. And who's on the other end of all of these calls? And then when he walks in the room and Sheila's like, I don't know who you are or if you're allowed to be here. And he's like, I'm definitely supposed to be here, Sheila. And
it's the first name check that he did multiple. Juan, later. It's very, very interesting.
I am going to make it undeniable that I am in control in this situation in a way that you don't understand, aura that he exuded. And then, of course, the phone call to the Attorney General who's there to lecture Fisk about, the Safer Streets Initiative not running through the governor or the Attorney General's office. And he's not abiding by the way of things. And there's no oversight. And they're there to lecture him and whack him on the nose. And then Mr. Charles comes in to thwart that, helping Fisk in the moment, right? Oh, we hear De Fontaine. So it's Val on the line. Interesting twist. Curious for your thoughts on that. But then we go elsewhere in the episode to the sequence between Mr. Charles and Vanessa and Wilson. And there is an undeniable note of tension there, right? And there's this question overall with everything that happened on the Northern Star of like, okay, we keep hearing from the captain and the first mate, we did what we were supposed to do. We sunk the ship, but on whose orders? Because Fisk is furious. So it's like, is Mr. Charles the one responsible for what that secret directive was that they were supposed to destroy this vessel? And is he actually working against Fisk, not in cahoots with him, which seems likely to me in terms of how this is going to unfold. And so that's interesting. Does Fisk think that this guy is there to be an ally, but he'll actually be an opponent? Who knows?
I don't think he's working against Fisk directly. I think he's just he needs Fisk and Vanessa for this weapons running operation. And he doesn't care the point is to hide the ball here. So if it's his directive to sink the ship, right, his priority is hide the operation, not what will look good for Mayor Wilson Fisk, right? So it's not like he's secretly working to undermine Fisk or anything like that. Maybe that's not what you were saying, but I think it's just that like, he's like, my agenda is the number one agenda. And if that is in contrast to what is good for you, I don't give a shit. Yeah. But if you're useful to me, I will help get Albany off your back or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean?
Which
it's just sort of like, as long as they're useful to me,
I
will be your friend, you know?
A potential thing to explore on the Val front as well, where you could see how like Val and Fisk and Mr. Charles working as aligned political operatives to control the levers of power in New York and the country and the globe and however far they want to stretch it. Obviously, this is a street level story, but how deep is the ambition when Val is also connected to the new Avengers in another slice of the story right now? It's like interesting. But yeah, I think the question of when these power brokers are truly working toward common cause or just it's convenient to be aligned in a given moment, and then that ends up being a source of conflict or one person needs to get the edge over the other. Like Kingpin is obviously not a character who responds well to somebody deceiving him. The only person he is willing to forgive that from ever is Vanessa. So
say it right. Say it correctly.
Vanessa. I can't really do it. That's one of your many gifts. Vanessa. So yeah, I'm curious to see how that goes. And it is fun to have Mr. Charles in the story. And I'm curious to see how that goes.
Here's where I will say something unexpectedly nice about Dr. Heather Glenn, a character that did not work at all for me in season 1, which is like taking her out of the love interest place and putting her into like sort of part of the villainy side of things. Her PTSD being part of it. Did I get a little like twice we get the sort of like canted angle she's going into her PTSD space sort of stuff. I don't need that to be a main storyline, but the fact that like they've slotted her into the vigilante trials, Jack Duquesne, all that sort of stuff, like that's just a much more interesting place to put that character than like lovelorn in the dark, love interest for Matt Murdock. You know what I mean? And so like, as long as I don't have to deal with a lot of like Matt and Heather stuff, I'm sure we'll have to deal with some, but as long as I don't have to deal with it a lot, I don't mind her being part of, the cabinet that is assembled around Wilson Fisk. I just prefer her there, but maybe I would prefer in general that she not be there at all. And is that the answer to another question I had in our notes here is like, which storyline character were you sort of hoping they had cut? Is there someone where you're like, oh, we're still doing this? Is it Dr. Heather Glenn? Is it anyone else?
I guess one episode might be too soon to say, but I wasn't like, oh, I'm excited to be back with Heather. That was not something that I felt, and not something that I agree with you. I think that it is also more interesting to me, and I think it is kind of like conceptually compelling to say that a character who in the first season was very, obviously like her work, and she's a therapist, she's a counselor, she's positioned as being there to help people and help them parse and navigate their trauma, and she's very set in her views in season 1 in a way that obviously leads to conflict between her and Matt, but she is also like principled and morally inclined. And, she has this real stance. She's writing the book about people who wear masks and the vigilante, like the what would lead a person to do this thing. And so to see her personal experience and her personal trauma, so substantially guide her into life decisions that are bad and reckless. And like you do feel, even though I don't have like a fondness or an affection for Heather, like when you see her break out the pencil eraser and change the mark on Jack's form because Hochberg called her and told her, Fisk and I want you to do this, like it's a bad feeling to see somebody morally compromised in that way. And so I am interested to see if she can pull herself out of that. But if I'm being honest, I don't care about Heather as a character, so it's hard to feel too invested in that outcome.
I'm not rooting for her to have a face turn. Yeah. I'm uninterested in a Dr. Heather Glenn redemption. Hochberg is another interesting, like, as I mentioned last season, this is an actor who I really, really like, John Benjamin Hickey. So I'm like excited to like for him to be sort of more integrated into the mix. And I did think his scene with Kristen was interesting because, all of a colleague of ours, and I won't name them in case they're like, leave me out of this, but like a colleague of ours was like a little bit like the anti-vigilante task force inside of like the ICE moment that we find ourselves in the country is maybe like a little too real for what I want for my Daredevil show. You know what I mean? They're just like, it's a little too much like this is reality and I don't want to deal with it. But like in the sort of like thinly veiled Trump-ish narrative that we're telling here, McDuffie saying, what happened to you?
Yeah.
And Hochberg saying, I read the tea leaves is just like such a true story that we're just seeing again and again and again around the country of just people being like, this is the way the pendulum is swinging. And if I want to stay in the good graces, my personal moral compass can swing that way too if it needs to, And so not necessarily someone who always started as corrupt and not someone who's necessarily evil, but someone who is just so narrowly focused on their own, protecting their own self-interest, which is evil in its own right. But like that, they're just sort of like, I read the tea leaves and I'm just going to go this way. That's how it's going to go. And I don't much care what the ramifications are if it means talking about like The Last of Us, who is the us? Like if me and mine are safe, then that's all that matters inside of the calculus of what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously, it's harrowing, it's sickening. And I like that conversation between Counselor McDuffie, as she is requested to be called, and Hochberg. And I thought it was chilling and effectively chilling. I think that if people are like, I don't, need to be like thinking of the horrific state of our current reality when I watch Daredevil, that's obviously completely reasonable and up to each individual person. I think that this version of Wilson Fisk on the Netflix show and in the MCU to date has been Trump-coded the entire time. And, Daredevil
I think specifically this person was talking about the task force, which was part of season 1 and we're just like living in an even more intensive, masked task forces are now going to the airport or whatever the case may be, moment in time. Okay, so let's talk about the fight scenes really quickly. We've got two significant ones, and then I'm going to throw the Karen and Matt training sequence in the middle as well. But so we heard you like it when Charlie Cox punches things. We're going to open with the Northern Star, which I don't know if it made you think of the Lemurian Star, but it did make me think of Winter Soldier, bathing him in red light as he kicks and flips and punches and stomps. We get Karen and Matt training. We get a not a overt stick mention, but a stick illusion inside of their training sequence. And I did like the moment when he sort of like somewhat loses control and she's like, you're going too fast, calm down, right? Sort of moment.
Indeed. Yeah.
And then we end with the Cherry Rescue. Yeah. We get a needle drop, gee whiz, this Carla Thomas track from 1961, which I really like. But again, sort of made me think of Winter Soldier, made me think of Nick Fury's apartment and stuff like that.
Sure.
I'm never upset to be thinking about Winter Soldier though. And and then we get Matt versus the task force. And then this like stomp and scream maneuver, which he did both in the beginning fight scene and the end, which I guess is his like new signature move. I don't really remember it as a signature Matt move, but this like stomping down and screaming and rage seems to be like maybe quite therapeutic. I don't know. Maybe perhaps we should try it. But that seems to be a new move for him. And then this like foggy PTSD as Cherry's heart rate is sort of slowing, triggers Matt, and then we get to quote Mr. Charles himself, divine fucking intervention from my guy Dex. What did you think of the use of the fight scenes here? This was like a season 1 note, not that we had, but something that they did going back through and fixing quote unquote season 1 of Daredevil Born Again was like add more action, more fight sequences. So like we're right off the bat, we're bookended by like major Matt in his new black suit going to battle. How did this work for you? Is this a huge component? Do you need it in every episode? How do you feel about it?
Interesting question. I thought that the action was decent in the first episode and functioned well inside of this episode to show us the new suit and allow us to get Matt on the security cam and see who is like aware that this is him and who isn't aware, et cetera. Like that was, I think that nothing here is even close to hearing you mention Winter Soldier is interesting to me. It reminds me, now we're big Rings of Power fans, but it reminds me of like the big battle in season 1 where people were like kind of, I'm saying people like this was a mass response. I don't think it was, but even so, like don't invite me to think about Helm's Deep if you're not going to be able to match Helm's Deep. It's kind of like, don't invite me to think about Winter Soldier if you're not going to match Winter Soldier. Fair. I don't know that that's like wise. But I just think nothing here is even close to like, this is the hallway fight or this is a stairwell. Nothing is even close to that. It's all kind of always fun to watch Charlie Cox's Daredevil kick some ass, though. And, I think that the way that they say fuck a lot in this episode, I would say almost like a notable, like we're saying fuck a lot. There's a snapping of an arm, an exposed bone. There was like, similar to season 1, I think a declaration of intent that this is like adult and violent, right? That was clarified there. I thought that the heartbeat sequence with Cherry was really good and really effective in how it showed us that, because every time you watch Matt Murdock as Daredevil fight, and this is true for a number of superheroes who wear masks and have a secret identity, you're like, oh my God, what if someone pulls the mask off? It's like always in the back of your mind as a fan reading a comic or watching a show or watching a movie. And then they fucking did it because he was so unmoored and destabilized by Cherry's heart attack, making him think of the rhythm of Foggy's heart slowing and fading as his best friend died in front of him and he couldn't do anything to stop it, that he let those guys kick his ass and reveal his face, reveal who he was. And then Dex came through and saved the day and it didn't end up mattering. But it was like, whoa, that was harrowing. That was effective.
What was funny is like, as soon as they pulled his mask off, I was like, oh, all those guys have to die. I was like, is Matt
and Dex is here to help.
Gonna kill a bunch? And then Dex is like, I got it. You don't have to get your hands dirty. I'll do it. And
incredible
I'm like,
stuff.
It's very thoughtful of him.
Really, just he's a charismatic and caring guy, and he's always there to help. That's always been true.
Plus the beautiful romantic gesture of like the handwritten note on the knife.
Who doesn't love a handwritten love letter? Great stuff.
With like a little doodle. I mean, come on.
Always thinking about branding. That Dex.
Yeah.
Here's my note for Matt and Karen. Is sexy, sweaty training kind of always hot? Yeah, it is. If it were me and I, were on the run, and there were wanted posters for me all around the city, as we got to see. I was laughing when we saw Karen Page poster. It was great. And then cutting to her with the wig and in the bodega and like the little season 1 caramel corn callback and all that with the folder stash. Like, I don't know if my secret lair, if I really didn't want to be found, would just be right above my known favorite bar. It's just a note from me to them. That's all.
I mean, on the one hand, I really agree with you. On the other hand, is it like we trust that like Josie won't narc on us sort of thing.
Maybe they just assume everyone's too stupid to look there or thinks they would not hide. It's like Bran, just I'm down here in the crypts. You'll never think to look there. Maybe it's one of those.
Fair. Okay, you already alluded to this, but I did think it was interesting the couple times that we got Matt talking both to Karen about like how we needed to believe in the system, and then to the owner of the Aegean Gardens, who's sort of like running this deportation operation of like, we have to try, right? So this like hopeful Matt Murdock, and I like it. It's a little like Steve Rogers. He's never going to be Steve Rogers, obviously. Like that's not even a possibility. But this sort of like, I don't like a despairing, cynical Matt Murdock. I like a sort of I gotta believe in something Matt Murdock, and despair can go with it. Inner angst always has to be there, right? Recrimination, self-hatred has to be there, like all of that. But like, we have to try.
Yeah.
I that just like really worked for me. And I just I like where we're finding versus where we found him at the beginning of the first season of Born Again. I really like where we find him here. And I'm invested in what this version of Matt can do. Can he stay connected to Karen? Can he in any way he chooses, can he succeed? Can he win? Can he fight the system, by using the system? I don't know. I'm hopeful. I dare to hope. Hope Core is back,
I'm really with you. Let me throw out a controversial take, which is I would like Karen and Frank to hook up. and for Matt and Karen to not be together. I thought that I heard your heartbeat.
I don't think that's either controversial or new from you. I think you've never wanted Karen with Matt, which is fine. And a lot of people want Frank and Karen together, right? Like this is a very
heartbeat. Take. That was one of my favorite stretches in the end of season 1 was like because it was just delicious. Matt, like, I heard your heartbeats. And Karen saying how unfair it was. And then like, did you hear my heartbeat when I saw you? And he's like, I did. So it's all there in all directions. And that's messy and sexy and complicated and fun. So I like that. I'm kind of like excited to see what the vibe is with Karen and Frank when Frank shows up at some point this season. I always love when Frank and Matt and Karen get a chance to interact. It's just like the best. I thought those were the highlights of season 1 for me. I really agree with you. Yeah.
Here's my question. Why not both? For Karen.
Why not? Why don't they become a throuple?
All 3.
Yeah, why not?
All together.
That would be great. We ship it. I would watch. I agree with you on Matt. I think that we have always, we talked about this so much when we revisited a lot of our favorite moments from the original series ahead of season 1. That state of torment, that complexity, that simultaneous like need and propensity to reflect and look inward and assess, but also the moments where he is really unable to process his relationship to his own ideals or needs or state of torment. It's why Matt is such a memorable character across iterations. I got a kick out of the like so the new suit with the double D, which we've been seeing teased for like a year and a half at this point. And, in like the glimpses of the rest of the season to come, we've seen that like there's the black paint is going to kind of chip away and reveal the red beneath the suit. Charlie Cox has talked about how he's excited about that kind of custom aspect of the suit that he gets to wear this season. Seeing the DD and then hearing the dastardly do-gooder joke, and then you remind yourself that Matt chose to call himself Daredevil, the devil of Hell's Kitchen, and this like the contradictions inside of him that drive him. And there's never just an either or with Matt. He's always moving in and out of these states. But the fact that at these moments, we have seen this version of Matt before in moments where his friends are there and people in his life are there for him. And they're saying to him, don't do this thing. Don't pull away. Don't recede. Don't hide. Let us help you. Let us remind yourself of who you are and who we are and what we can try to do together. And he can't do it. He won't allow himself to do it. So I really agree with you. I think to see in a moment that is so dire, like this one, where they're in hiding, they can't engage with the people around them who, even just to go see Cherry under the bridge, Cherry's like, I'm shocked. Like, I kind of can't believe you're here, right? Like, Kirsten doesn't know that he's okay. We hear Kirsten and Cherry talk, and then Cherry says to Matt, like, can't you just like let her know that you're okay? No, I don't want to risk her. And Cherry's like, well, what about me? Great moment.
I can't remember. This probably was from season 1. Did they have the sort of like reservation, like auto message coding in season 1? I can't remember, but I'm like,
I can't remember either.
That's good. I was like, that's really good.
Handy to be able to send that
code.
Quick. No, I can't make this reservation tonight. Please come help me. Immediately. It worked. But yeah, like a moment where Matt should be feeling helpless and hopeless and full of despair is the moment where he's like, no, I am going to tell myself that we can find a way. I can find a way. This city can find a way. The institutions that we have put our faith into, even when they failed us, like we can find a way to restore that faith in each other and in the society that we build and inhabit. Like it's awesome to see Matt in that place when he has every reason not to be. So I felt that as well.
I think we've already mentioned sort of this like larger connection to the MCU stuff, but like we've got Val here. We get a Jessica Jones mention. We know that Jessica Jones is in this season. I will just say, like, as we sort of try to navigate Mr. Charles's like murky motivations and stuff like that, the idea that like Val directing Albany to cooperate with Fisk's anti-vigilante agenda while also creating the new Avengers in presumably a similar timeline is confusing to me.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to let the season play out and help me understand what's going on there. But like, Val, like Mr. Charles inside of this episode, is just like is gonna go wherever she needs to go and be on whatever side she needs to be on for her own agenda. So like, we'll stay tuned to find out. But I just think it's interesting that the architect of the new Avengers is like, sure, let's have these vigilante trials. Why not? Interesting,
Yeah.
So
yeah, we'll I guess the all of the different strands of Val and how Val, who's been like kind of ultimately, and if we counted up the total minutes of screen time, it's fairly limited, but we have like a number of different properties and appearances, and we have like, the CIA, the established CIA connection and tie. So trying to tap in, I was like, oh yeah, this is an interesting moment to invoke Val in this way. I'm curious to see if Val is like in the show or just a name to mention on the phone that is a familiar name that we associate with Langley and lends some credibility to Mr. Charles walking in and saying, I'm from Langley, even if that's not true.
I feel like it's a way for Lillard's character to be sort of connected to something that feels established in the MCU.
Yes.
The same way that, like, if we see like Department of Damage Control or something like that, like someone as part of a larger organization that we already recognize. Speaking of which, and speaking of MCU connections, shall we swing right into our Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer check-in? All right, let's do it. All right, so release date. So all of Daredevil Born Again and then the Punisher special, that brings us like into May. And then we have June off and most of July. And then July 31st, we get Spider-Man Brand New Day, directed by Destin Daniel Cretton. This is the first of the Holland Spidey movies not to be directed by John Watts.
Right.
But of course, Destin Daniel Cretton has worked in the MCU, directed Shang-Chi, worked on Wonder Man, which just got a second season. Congratulations, Wonder Man. We're so thrilled. And then the movie itself was written by Chris McKenna and Eric Summers, who worked on the original trilogy. So like the tone, though they have talked about how this will feel tonally different in terms of like characterization. We have the same writers on board, so I'm not really worried about this not feeling like Holland Spider-Man or Zendaya's MJ or anything like that.
Right.
And premise-wise, it's set 4 years after the events of No Way Home.
Yes.
So I think this solves a question I had, which is like Ned and MJ have finished their undergrad at MIT and are perhaps moving to the city. And that's why
new neighbors.
Peter winds up at their housewarming sort of thing, right? Like that's their post-grad, we're going to go to the city sort of move.
I guess so.
Right
so like Peter at the beginning of the trailer is watching a video, of Ned and MJ talking about, like they'll pretend this is like you're not the happiest you've ever been in your entire life. I can't at the beginning of MIT. So are we quickly moving across time at all before we root in the present timeline?
Or
is he like watching this video on repeat for 4 years, torturing himself? Could be either.
I feel like he's stalking their social media accounts for 4 years, and we're going to see him, like putting his costume in the washing dryer and like all the other things that we see sort of in this trailer. I want to start with what isn't in this trailer, which is Sadie Sink's face, right? Right. We do not see Stranger Things star, current West End Juliet herself, Sadie Sink, her beautiful face, her flaming red hair in this trailer. We do, however, see a character who is restrained at the minute 43 second mark, doing a sort of Night King raise hand move at a minute 57. So we know that they've been obscuring which character she's going to play. How far do you think they're going to take this sort of obscuring Sadie Sink from the promo? Was that intriguing to you? Was that frustrating to you? How did you feel about how she was deployed in the trailer?
I mean, I assume she's playing Jean Grey and that the X-Men are going to be a pretty big part of this movie. And I think there are a number of different clues in this trailer that support that. So I guess at a certain point, it feels to me like they might just show us and tell us that, but maybe they won't. Maybe that'll be a surprise when you sit down in the theater and see the movie. And it's possible that's not who she's playing, but like...
What they could do is like similar to, even though Zendaya is not playing Mary Jane, similar to like that thing that happens in Homecoming where her name's Michelle and at the very end they're like MJ. You know what I mean? So like if we don't have her name until the very end of the movie, like that is something they could do if they wanted to. I also think she's playing Jean Grey. I also think we see her like psychically possess various people inside of, even though as people are quick to point out, that's not usually how Jean Grey's psychic powers work. She's not really like a psychic symbiote host, like hopping from host to host. That's not really the Jean Grey maneuver, but it does seem like if she is playing Jean Grey, the sequence where we see some sort of entity hopping from like a bewildered older woman through various soldiers all around Peter at the minute 51 second mark. there's also all this talk about mutation.
Right.
This phrase amounts to a kind of rebirth, which some people are like, is that Phoenix language? So like,
yeah.
I also think she's playing Jean Grey. I also have like no doubt she's playing Jean Grey.
Yeah.
I don't know
which is
if
awesome.
this is going to be a big, I don't, yes, it's great casting. I don't know if this is going to be a big, if I agree that it's going to be a big X-Men movie. I think this is going to be like a Jean Grey intro, but not like a larger sort of X-Men sort of thing, you know?
I think one as a way into the other, potentially. And again, like, we genuinely have, to be clear, no idea if this is true or not. It just seems like there's a lot of evidence mounting. I think that so I agree with you. I think that because we get that cool, before we get kind of the close-up of the hands that are cuffed to the chair, the sort of like zoomed in shot, we get the panned out shot of this like observation cell, like basically like mini studio apartment set up in the middle of a
under lock and key. Yeah.
And the kind of, so there, you're in this like white observation room, and there's this cell in the middle, and the wood panels like rising, and we can see the feet are manacled, and then when it gets higher, we see the hands are manacled, and then we cut into that closer view of the cuffed hands, and it's like a bedroom setting in the room, and then there, in the outer observation deck around that, the cameras everywhere. So this idea that whoever's in there is not only imprisoned, but is being observed, is being studied, that would certainly fit with this being
a captured mutant, a powerful sight, like someone like putting Magneto in a completely plastic prison, like someone, a mutant who is so powerful, we need to take all of these extremes to keep her contained.
Exactly. I think that the so at the 2:07 mark, when Peter kind of slams into the bus and scrapes against the window, and there's a kid inside and headphones and a jet jersey, I don't actually think that's Rogue, but I think the fact that the hair is so Rogue-like is just a little wink to maybe give us a little bit more of it, put us in an X-Men mindset potentially. But I think
I saw so many people be like, "That's Rogue" or whatever, and I was just like, "But also, that's a very popular hairstyle right now, like the sort of like Narcissa-esque."
Is the Rogue sweeping the world?
I love it. The like block coloring, like a bleach section in the front of your hair is like quite a popular. So like, I think like she's wearing like a green, like the way how she's dressed, like possibly, but like also it's just like that's also just like how young people look.
Maybe. I mean, I don't think that actually will prove to be Rogue, but it did feel like they know that people are going to watch this and hear the talk of mutations and speculate about, is Sadie Sink playing Jean Grey, and like some of the other stuff that we hear and like think about mutants and the X-Men are going to be on their mind, as they have been now across the last few years of anticipating the like full arrival after many sort of drips and dabs across properties. So it felt like a little like wink to me, but who knows? I think that the Tremel Tillman character saying to Spidey, we are faced with a danger that we can't control, one we can't even see, certainly feels to me like he is speaking about the mutants. Now, that could be any number of other things. It just feels like we know definitively we're at a moment in the MCU where that is what we are moving toward, right? That stretch of story. And so, like, these feel like these clues and signs and indications to me don't feel like reaches for us to try to connect to in a way that they did maybe 5-10 years ago.
I really agree.
The captioning, if you turn the closed captioning on YouTube, on the trailer, by the way, we should say this trailer like obliterated like every trailer record in the history of humanity. People seem hyped about this movie. And I didn't even say that at the beginning, but thought this trailer was fucking great and I'm hyped.
Oh yeah.
I was like, damn, this is awesome.
I would say both trailers that we're talking about today are fucking awesome. And also, like, Year of Zendaya, is it not? Like, it's absolutely insane.
It's so wild that they're in the Odyssey and Spider-Man like 2 weeks apart. What a July. My goodness. What a time. So if you turn on the closed captioning on YouTube on the trailer, when you see this at the 150 mark, we are faced with a danger that we can't control, one we can't see. He is labeled as Bill. Yeah. His character has not been identified fully, but he is. This seems reasonable to, I think, Marvel Comics fans to speculate that Bill is, in fact, William Metzger, Department of Damage Control, anti-mutant agenda. So I think, like, they didn't have to put Bill in there. It feels like another, like, you guys probably know where this is heading, and we're giving you, you recently broke out the all-time meme, Mr. Policeman. We gave you all the clues on a House of R episode. We could do it again right now. Yeah, and so that's exciting.
I think it feels very certain the way that Department of Damage Control has been employed in Spider-Man properties, and like Tremel Tillman is like a perfect casting for Department of Damage Control.
Good.
Let's go to the next part of my note. I flipped the notes around a little on you, but it makes sense if we're talking about mutants. Let's go into the mutation plot, right?
Yeah.
So like leaving potential Jean Grey and the X-Men aside,
Yes.
big thing to leave aside, but let's leave that aside for a moment.
Yeah.
We have a stated mutation plot for Peter Parker, right? And which I think is such like a thematically interesting idea. This is, of course, something that Spider-Man has dealt with in the comics on and off. You know, this is a classic Spidey plot. But this idea of this point in time, and Tom Holland has talked about this for Peter Parker, like, you know, the end of No Way Home, like shedding everything that he knew to go off on his own and become not Peter Parker, but just Spider-Man, right? He's not really Peter Parker anymore, right? Aunt May is dead and no one remembers him. Yeah. He's just Spider-Man. Yeah. Is this movie about work-life balance? I have a question and I hope it is. But this idea that like he's grappling with what it means to go from like a boy to a man, right? A high schooler into like an adult living in New York City. And alongside of that sort of emotional coming of a different age storyline for him is this physical mutation, this organic, you know, this Tobey Maguire-esque organic webbing idea. A lot of connections, visual connections in this trailer to the Garfield movies and the Maguire movies and into the Spider-Verse, you know, which is like a big reason why No Way Home was so popular with people was, of course, it felt like this interconnected Spideyverse. Let's lean in. And this trailer very much feels like it's leaning in. But like this physical mutation going along with the emotional transformation of a young man into still a young man, but slightly older. And then we get this like very intriguing shot at the 2-minute, 12-second mark of Spider-Man with like all blacked out eyes. Is he mind controlled by potentially Jean Grey? Possibly. Is he mutating in some way? Probably. Arjuna, our producer, and plenty of the internet are like, is this man spider? Are we getting like man spider, which might mean we get multiple limbed Peter Parker? I don't know how I feel about that, but in the sort of like, quote, more grounded, like Tom Holland Spider-Man movies that we're supposed to be getting. But how do you feel about this mutation plot in general? And maybe do you have any theories about the 2-minute, 12-second mark shot of Spidey?
Yeah, I'm into all of this. You know, I think that obviously it connects with the thing we'll talk about next, which is just this ongoing state of nobody remembering who Peter is. And that's just really fucking sad, right? And there are some interesting glimpses in this trailer of maybe the pull that other people are feeling toward a certain, a lot of pictures of Spider-Man in MJ's apartment, et cetera. But in general, I think that this was another interesting way to me because, like, to be clear, Peter Parker is the idea of a mutation. That's not the same as mutants and the X-Men. This is a different thing. No. But it is a clever. No. I'm not saying you're saying it, but like that's a clever way in the trailer to still create a kind of sense of like connectivity and parallel experience with like a thing inside of you is changing. This is like core to these characters and their comics origins and why so many people around the world love them and love to read about their lives, right? Like, you have already been through this thing and then you are changing again in some way. You know, one of the bits of the narration that we hear is spiders have 3 life cycles. When better cycles can leave the spider vulnerable to threats. So this idea of like ongoing change after confronting this massive change of just becoming Spider-Man in the first place. I think the man spider theories are interesting and seeing the shift from needing we got that great, this was all over the internet too, the kind of side-by-side shot of Tony in his lab in the black tank top and then Tom Holland's Peter in this trailer in the black tank top, like a very like visually coded Tony Stark connection and still rooting this Peter in that relationship and that bond and that history, but also sort of saying like, you know, this suit, there's no tech, right? This isn't actually the like Iron Man's apprentice Spider-Man era anymore. Like he is changing in a number of different ways, including how his power set functions in the MCU. I think like the sequence where he falls out of the window and he wakes up in the cocoon of webbing and he's like, oh shit, oh my oh my God, like I'm not wearing my web shooters, what am I going to do? And then falls and then saves himself anyway. And you're like, holy shit, they're going to do the organic web shooting. Like this is a wild moment. And the eye, the full pools of black in the eye. I think that there's a way to do the man-spider thing, which is more still rooted and grounded in this version of the story and doesn't necessarily feel like here are all of my many limbs and is more just like leaning into the idea of the spider subsuming the man and what
this
the
is what
balance,
I mean by work-life balance.
Yeah, exactly. What the balance of the humanity is.
You can't be all Spider-Man all the time. You have to be Peter Parker. Like, if he's just obliterated the Peter Parker part of his life, right, and he's just like, I'm just Spider-Man, and that is reflected in, like, the spider overtaking him. Well, and I kind of like that as a sort of, we all have lessons to learn about work-life balance. Why not?
Certainly.
So,
I think there's, like, a really emotionally rich vein to tap there, too, because one of the things that we hear, Peter say, he's got this, right, the letter, there it is, it's back, and he's like reading parts of it in this trailer. And, we hear sometimes Spider-Man has to do the hard thing, even if it breaks Peter Parker's heart. And it's like, what if maintaining this sacrifice and this new reality that he opted into because it was a thing he felt was right and had to do to preserve the world around him has become... The pain it's unbearable. The humanity is what makes it difficult. So then you have something like Bruce saying, if the DNA is mutating, it could be extremely dangerous. You have the actual peril, like, how is this a survivable thing, this evolution, this mutation? But also just like, well, what if Peter almost welcomes the suppressing of the humanity and the Peter inside of the Spider-Man? Because it's too hard to be Peter if he has to be Peter without MJ and without Ned and without the people he loves. Like, I think that would be a really beautiful story to explore. And what a great classic genre way to use the, like, actual manifestation of his powers and abilities to tell us how he's feeling inside. Like that, I'm really hyped for this movie.
We love a mutant metaphor. The memory plot, which as you alluded to, so like we get a lot of sad yearning, which I love a yearn always.
Yearning tendrils.
We get a lot of MJ and Ned inside of this trailer, but I am curious with Jean Grey and Department of Damage Control and Frank and Bruce and a rogues gallery, which we can list out later. How much room is there for MJ and Ned inside of this movie? Like, are we seeing a lot of the actual MJ and Ned scenes and they won't be a huge part of this movie? I would not be surprised in the year of Zendaya when she has so much shit to do. Yeah. And there was also, and this is just like, I don't know the answer to this, but like, there was also a question of whether or not Zendaya would even be in this movie for a while as they were like figuring out the shape of it and the contracts. And so like, is Zendaya here to a limited degree? I don't have an answer. I'm just asking questions, but like, I think it's entirely possible that they could just like load up a bunch of the Zendaya stuff into the trailer because that's what people want is Tom Holland and Zendaya and Jacob, of course. So like, I have some questions about that. And then you wanted to call out who we see, I don't know, tucking MJ's hair behind her ear inside of this trailer.
Oh my God, Ezra Bridger is here. Manus Pandey is here. I guess there's some, speculation of like who he is. Could he be playing Harry Osborn? Is that something that's going to happen in this movie? That would be, I think, very interesting and very cool. You do, I think, start to worry if he's playing someone as big as Harry, that there are just maybe too many characters in this movie. But we've had that concern with the Spider-Man movie before, and it has. Where
are you these days on No Way Home? Like, I know that like, so here's like the larger temp. Yeah. I think on No Way Home, which is that people like had the best fucking time in the theater and that they loved it and that there are perhaps some diminishing returns on rewatch for them. But that was like a concern about No Way Home is like, are there just too many fucking characters, too many things going on in this movie? I've actually felt like I actually haven't rewatched No Way Home a lot. And so as a result, my brain is just clinging to the parts of the movie that I really like. So I actually think I have found myself liking it more as time has gone on because I'm only thinking about the parts that really worked for me and I really liked. Mainly everything Andrew Garfield does. But like, But just anecdotally, I feel like on rewatch, people aren't as high on No Way Home as they were before. What are your thoughts on that?
I certainly haven't had any I haven't experienced any diminishment in my fondness for it, but I haven't. It's been a minute since I've watched it. I'll have to see when we're closer to this movie and revisiting all of it, how I feel about it. But I still really like it, and in general, the Spidey franchise is one of my favorite parts of the MCU, and I think one of the most successful parts of the MCU. So I have a lot of fondness for all of those films. Your question about how much MJ and Ned will be in the movie is a really interesting one because so in the to connect it back to Sadie Sink for a second.
Yeah.
My initial, I think much of the Jean thing was there as a theory right away, honestly, because there's been so much X-Men casting rumor talk for so long. That was out there as a possibility. If you have red hair and you're talented enough to performer to maybe anchor a phase of the MCU, maybe people are going to think you're Jean Grey. But for a while also, it was could she be playing Gwen? And then there were also a lot of Harry casting rumors. And so I was not expecting MJ and Ned to be a big part of this movie because I thought we were going to be in a Gwen Harry kind of really a brand new day transitional phase and sort of just the character set around Peter. This trailer to me signals something so clearly distinct from that, which is no, the things that matter to Peter still matter to him. And yes, we have the flowers on May's grave and of course the painful letter and just the reinforcement that nothing has changed. They don't know who he is. Bruce Banner, when he goes to him, in his Empire State University sweatshirt to ask for his help, does not know who he is. Even the Avengers don't know, haven't been brought into the loop of who he is. That's kind of wild. I think that the fact that he's I've moved in across from you and I'm at your parties and I'm here. It's it makes me feel like they're actually going to be in the movie way more than I anticipated because this is still just the set of people who are most important to him. And especially because of the MJ moments in this trailer where again, we have all of the stuff on the wall in their apartment, all of these pictures of Spider-Man behind Peter in that shot at the end. And it's then when MJ and Ned are watching the news footage, Sheila giving Sheila here, Sheila everywhere in today's pod, giving Spider-Man the key to the city, that look on MJ's face, it feels to me like she is remembering who he is, or at least is drawn. Maybe this is just classic MJ Spidey stuff, but maybe there's an awakening inside of her.
I think she my feeling would be she remembers Spider-Man more than she remembers Peter Parker. Do you know what I mean? There's something there. There's something that, and she's smart and we loved watching her figure it out in the first place,
so good.
In Far From Home and stuff like that. So all of that's interesting to me. I don't know. I'll be curious. Yeah. I'll be curious how much Jean Grey, Sadie Sink feels like the female lead of this movie and how much Michelle Zendaya feels like the female lead of this movie. And not that there only needs to be one, but I'm curious about that. Let's talk about Sheila. But more importantly, let's talk about Spidey and Frank, right?
Yes.
So there is a ton of Daredevil Born Again crossover here, right? Because we have Sheila here giving Spidey the key to the city. Mm-hmm. Feels like a slight potential Daredevil Born Again spoiler to me because I feel like there's no way this season ends with Fisk still in charge if Spidey, a masked vigilante, is being given the key to the city by Sheila. So I like this idea. A lot of people have been throwing around this season 1, episode 4 quote from Sheila from Daredevil Born Again, where she says to Daniel Blake, I was here before you and before Fisk, and I will be here long after you're both gone. So if the Fisk administration collapses by the end of season 2, Daredevil Born Again, but Sheila's still here handing out keys to the city, it's an ending I'm kind of interested in. Yeah. The Hand is also here.
Yes.
Again, this is a very packed movie, but the Hand is also here, which is such a Daredevil sort of connective tissue moment. And then obviously, we'll talk about Frank Castle, but there's a lot of rumors that Charlie Cox is in this movie. Charlie Cox says he is not in this movie, but so too did Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire.
This is so weird to me as a thing to, I would say, clearly lie about, given that it makes complete sense for them to interact and is established that they have interacted. Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock was in the last Spider-Man movie. Now, it's of course, there's the whole nobody remembers who this guy is aspect here, sure. But the idea of them reconnecting as Spider-Man and Daredevil or Peter and Matt in some way or all of the above, whatever, feels like so plausible that I don't know. I never believe any of these. Of course, I understand they have to manufacture this fiction and tell us that they're not in these movies. But this is one where it's like, that would just be, I think, fine to know that Charlie Cox is in this movie, if he is.
I know. I guess they just want that moment, that same like, holy shit, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire here moment in the theater. But I don't think, like, to your point, Charlie Cox has already been in a Spider-Man movie, so it like doesn't feel.
Bringing
and also you have
a
minor Daredevil born again character in Sheila is here, and then of course Frank Castle is here. So like,
I was thrilled.
This Punisher Spider-Man relationship inside of this trailer is so fun. We get like a really fun, cheeky, like, basically Captain America language moment where we get to sort of like edit Frank Castle to make him Spider-Man movie friendly with the web on the mouth. But like, this is what Holland said, talking about, he says, the relationship between Spider-Man and the Punisher is so funny and it changed a lot. It evolved as we were shooting because John and I would improvise. It started as this relationship of two people who kind of hate each other, I guess. And as we started improvising, it became this kind of big brother, little brother rivalry. It might be my favorite dynamic I've ever seen with Spider-Man. So that's very
incredible,
intriguing and exciting. What is funny though is, going back through how Holland has talked about this movie, he also said that big brother, little brother dynamic about Bruce Banner in this movie. So this seems to be just sort of like a Tom Holland go-to.
It's good. Better to stick to a couple talking points than accidentally spoil all the things they don't want him to spoil.
For Tom, sure. But something that Feige said a while ago about putting Destin Daniel Cretton in charge of this movie is that he had all these like Marvel comic book covers that he was excited to recreate, including like Punisher and Spidey covers. He already recreated the cover of the very first Spidey story in this trailer at the 2-minute, 8-second mark. There's Spidey carrying a guy through the air, and it's like the original Spider-Man comic cover. So, you know, obviously these Marvel directors love to like flash their comic book bona fides, and we love that for them. But like, there is so much rich, fertile Punisher and Spidey territory. Yeah. This is a really fun mode to find Frank Castle in, like, because Punisher, I was not a huge fan of the Netflix Punisher series. I've said that before. So Punisher in his sort of like grim, dark Punisher place. Yeah. Not my fave. Punisher bouncing off someone else who is not in that space, really fun. And like, I'm really excited for him here as a counter to Peter. What did you think of him in the trailer here?
I mean, I pretty much always love John Garthol as Frank Castle Punisher. Like, I just think he's great in the role and really perfect for it. And even when the episodes that he's in are not good, he's still so kind of mesmerizing to me. Yeah. And I loved this, the humor of the like about to say motherfucker and the webbing of his mouth, go home, like all that was very cute. And I think the vibe that we are going to get to see Frank in, to your point, is just really interesting, and I'm looking forward to it. What I really liked most about it was, I mean, obviously like the broader framing of this section, the Daredevil ties, interesting, and this stretch of story, how all these things are going to connect, interesting. I'm most compelled by like what the hell, Frank, you just hit me with a van, quit your whimpering. Clearly they're in each other's lives. There's just like a rhythm to the way they're interacting that is like they are present in on the streets of New York together. And so I'm kind of like, oh, it's fascinating to me to think about, especially in this moment of Peter's life, in this circumstance where he is spending his time watching videos of the people he misses and they don't remember who he is, and trying to like introduce himself anew to the people that he longs to be with. That like Frank Castle is a steady and a constant when the rest of his time is like watching TikToks of his girlfriend who doesn't know who he is and going to his beloved aunt's grave. Like, Frank being the person who's there in your life when all these other people are missing is fascinating.
Frank and Professor Banner, like, these are like, you know, a Spider-Man all alone in the world is a dangerous thing, you know, and so like, of course, but like, he does have community. It's just like different community, and of course, from the very beginning, from Tom Holland's very first audition, this idea of like, we're going to pair Tom Holland Spidey with an elder statesman of the MCU, be that Tony Stark, Stephen Strange, Bruce Banner, Frank Castle, you know, so these sort of like dad figures for or like older brother, if you prefer, figures for Peter Parker is a hallmark of this franchise. But And then I love seeing Bruce here. I love that Bruce Banner's now a professor at the fictional Empire State University. As you mentioned, and I wrote in the notes, so excited to see that Peter has an Empire State University sweatshirt. Does that mean he's going to school? Again, is this sort of like, does Peter Parker exist as a student at Empire State University? Or did he just put that on in order to go in and talk to Bruce Banner in the classroom?
That's what I hope.
Me too.
I hope
Me
that
too.
Peter, one of our great minds, genuinely a bright kid who loves to learn, is at school, studying in college, and not just watching TikToks of his best friend and girlfriend talk about how much they love to be at their school.
Maybe that's how this ends. Maybe how the movie ends is like Peter, who realizes that he needs to be Peter Parker as much as he needs to be Spider-Man, like enrolls in school or something. That would be great. And maybe the hoodie was just like part of him trying to get in there.
Yeah, like I feel like it's possible.
That'd be really funny if he's just like grabs a hoodie, like webs a hoodie from somewhere, and it's just sort of like, I belong here in this classroom, as if you couldn't just like walk in wearing your street clothes and also pass as a student.
I know. Sure. I think it's possible that that's a version of a disguise for him to infiltrate. But it would be really nice if he looked at it later and was like, no, I can do this. I can just live a life. That would be great. But maybe he's just there taking classes. What literature classes do we think Peter Parker is taking? Who knows?
Oh, women's literature. Okay, so to recap.
Yeah.
Frank Castle, Bruce Banner.
I'm in.
Jean Grey.
I'm in. Definitely in.
Michelle.
In.
Ned.
In. Ezra Bridger.
According to this trailer, Scorpion.
Yeah.
Tarantula.
Mm-hmm.
Boomerang. Tombstone.
Yes.
Department of Damage Control.
Bill.
The Hand.
Yeah.
And his inner demons.
Yeah.
These are all the things that Spidey is potentially fighting this season. Now, I'm not that stressed about it in the way that like some people are like, shades of Spider-Man 3, which was, again, a concern about No Way Home. Because like some of these characters, Boomerang, Tombstone, like whatever, these can be like very quick, montage-esque sort of things. If we're montaging through 4 years of Spider-Man as MJ and Ned complete their schooling at MIT, like there's plenty of room for rando fights. Scorpion, and I'm a huge fan of Scorpion personally, of Michael Mando specifically.
Same.
So like if we get Michael Mando, if we get my Better Call Saul fave, like some more screen time, he seems like with the mech suit, he has a little bit more going on than everyone else. Yes. But like, I'm not that worried about all the rogues gallery, but there does seem to be a lot of movie in this movie in general. So, how are you feeling?
I'm in a very similar place. Scorpion is exciting because we've been waiting for this return, in a meaningful way since Homecoming. And like, even just him getting a line in the trailer feels like a little way to signal to us that maybe he has, perhaps it is like 2 scenes, 2.5 scenes instead of, but I do agree. I think that like Tarantula, Boomerang, Tombstone, possibly even the Hand, that this feels to me like we're going to be like getting flashes of the people Spider-Man is fighting.
I do think that there have been some interviews that like Tombstone is going to be like a bigger.
Yes, Tombstone is like in the cast for sure. But I think we're going to move in through just some flashes of sequences, and then like not have any of those characters necessarily feel like they are the primary villain, because I do think that I just feel like Tremel, Tillman, and Damage Control are going to be the oppositional force, the force that Peter and Spider-Man have to contend with. And the fact that Spider-Man is sitting across from Bill, from Tremel Tillman's Bill, in his Spider-Man suit, and that indicates perhaps that he is like working with or for Damage Control, or has been brought in to assist, and then has to rebel against maybe their directive.
So is there
would be interesting.
A way that Jean Grey, whether she's named or not, is positioned as the antagonist until they realizes like, we're not so different, you and I. You're a mutant. I'm going through a mutation.
That's what feels likely to me. Is they're like, help us with this problem, and then he's like, wait, actually, isn't this the person I should help? That would be great.
This hot girl? I don't know. All right,
that would be great.
Okay, so that has been.
I can't wait.
Us marinating in the world of the MCU, but the year Zendaya continues apace, and it's not just the Odyssey. Of course, we have Dune Part 3, not to mention the drama. There's a lot of enjoyable Zendaya content this year. Let's go now to our Dune Part 3 trailer medium dive. All right, so quick facts, right? December 18th, 2026 is the release of this is just like so our year, and I'm so excited for us. There's just so much going on. I'm thrilled. Same day as Avengers Doomsday, as we've been talking about for a while. Dune won the battle for the IMAX screens, however. So Avengers Doomsday, you're going to have to see it in a different format. The IMAX belongs to Denis Villeneuve.
So
any feelings on that?
Yes. If it had to be one or the other because they were going to both stay on the same day, I'm glad it's Dune. That's a pretty easy call for me. It's honestly genuinely uncomplicated. I think this is like, I'm hopeful that Doomsday will be good. I think this is like pretty embarrassing for the MCU to have like
hugely
planted the flag with this big showy countdown clock, peacocked, puffed out the feathers and flexed like, we're not going to fucking move, you move for us. And then it's like, not only did Dune not move, they got IMAX. It's just embarrassing. So it's a shame.
It's not just embarrassing. It's like, I mean, it is.
You're not
the
primary force in pop culture anymore. It's like a diminishment.
A huge diminishment.
Yeah.
Just sort of like, can you imagine in 2019 an Avengers movie being,
unthinkable,
cowed by a literary adaptation? Anyway, okay, so here we go. Dune Part 3. This is what Denis Villeneuve is calling, quote, the epic conclusion to his Dune saga, even though obviously there are many more books. But this is the last book focused primarily on Paul. And so perhaps this is Denis' Paul saga rather than his like Dune saga, if you prefer.
Feels like the end of that might be a great time to do a Paul of Fame. At the end of the Paul saga. It's almost like we always intended to.
Almost like it was the right move all along. And this was always the plan, and there's always been a plan. Maybe if we tattoo our faces and just start going around spreading the word that this was always the plan, then like
why not?
Everyone will bend the knee and believe. Okay, so the source material here is mostly Dune Messiah, but it appears there might be sort of like what I'm calling a smudge bleed of Children of Dune in the mix here, just based on some casting stuff and stuff like that. But and we've been talking about this since the beginning because we are Dune heads, but I'm just going to read a quote from Brian Herbert, Frank Herbert's son, who wrote the intro to Dune, an edition of Dune Messiah that I have. So this is in his intro. He said, the second novel in this series, so Dune Messiah is the second novel, Dune Part 1 and 2, those movies adapted one novel. This is the second novel, but the third movie. The second novel in the series flipped over the carefully crafted hero myth of Paul Muad'Dib and revealed the dark side of the Messiah phenomenon that appeared to be so glorious in Dune. Many readers didn't want that dose of reality. They couldn't stand the demotion of their beloved, charismatic champion. So this is what we've been talking about from the beginning, is that Frank Herbert wrote these books as an intentional critique of sort of the one hero narrative, the savior narrative, the Messiah narrative, all that sort of stuff like that. And that is what we are getting now. This is sort of like where we were headed all along here in Dune Part 3, Dune Messiah. Denis has been very clear from the beginning to set those expectations about this movie, hopefully priming audiences to not be shocked and surprised by what they find here. But this is what he said when they did the big IMAX reveal, the trailer, a bunch of the trades were there. So these quotes are sort of pulled from the Deadline write-up and the Variety write-up and stuff like that. But here's what he said at that release. He said it will be a very different film, very different, a Dune movie, but with a different tone, with a different rhythm, with a different pace. It's a more action-packed and more tense film, more muscular than the other two, I will say. And it's a movie that takes place many years after the first two films, a bit like the book Dune Messiah. It gives new insight on what happened to Paul Atreides. So there's a time gap, 17 years.
Right, in the film.
So Spider-Man, 4 years later. Dune Part 3, 17 years later. Where we see Paul this is Denis again, where we see Paul dealing with the consequences of having too much power and him trying to figure out how to get out of the cycle of violence. And of course, he's an emperor who can see the future. So he's kind of invincible. 17-year time jump. Anyone freaked out about old age makeup? Denis doesn't seem that worried about it, right? He's just sort of like, we're not doing a massive like aging process on the actors.
What do you make of, to the extent that, because again, let's remind people, we're going to do a very, very quick, just a few minutes. We're going to talk about Dune a lot over the next few months before we get to watch this movie in December. This will not be the only preview conversation we have. We'll do a few minutes of book spoiler talk at the end. So maybe if you want to save your answer to this. So then what do you, given, hey, this is just our cast. We've got Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya and Pugh and like, he took a challenge that already existed with the time jump and made it bigger. It's 12 years in the text, and he made it 17. What is do you have a theory for why?
Not outside. I have a very strong theory, but not outside.
Okay, we'll come back to it. Yeah. We will come back to it then.
So 17 years later is where we find these characters.
I will say on your the kind of opening note reminder of Frank Herbert's desire to interrogate the idea of the chosen one, the Messiah, the savior, the figure of lore and prophecy. I think that, and we like you mentioned, we've been talking about this across the coverage of both of the prior films, but that was one of the things that I thought like Villeneuve did so undeniably well, was like signal his intention to, even just the way he talked about why he wanted to get to adapt this book and think about these as connected. Like, I will be interested to see what the response is when the movie comes out, and if there are, because there was obviously, when we covered the second film, there was there was a little bit of a, oh, is Paul supposed to be like?
But it wasn't even that. There was that.
Yeah.
But then there was also from our beloved colleagues, like, no, the film did not do a good job doing that. And I disagree. Like, I agree with you. I think the film, again, we talked about like the Anakin Skywalker murder strut, like all this sort of stuff that Paul is doing at the end that feels very like, coded.
For sure.
But some of our incredibly brilliant media savvy pals who saw the movie did not agree that the movie paved the way, and they thought it was more of like a white savior story. And so
the movie paved the way. Would you say I paved the way? Would you scream it as Paul Muad'Dib Atreides screamed it to the assembled in the South? I paved the way.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I thought he did a great job, but there are some people who. And so if that is true of our pals, our colleagues who, again, are very media literate and very savvy, very smart, what about the more casual film goer who, like, did not spend weeks afterwards, like, arguing about the movie and debating its merits and all this sort of stuff like that to have, like, their book reader pals be like, well, actually, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So, like, you know, where will they be as they head into this third
I'm
movie?
so curious to see how that goes when we all watch the film together on IMAX and then go to a smaller screen to see Avengers Doomsday. Because, I think, and maybe it's something that people's relationship to it will change a little bit as they revisit then the prior films. Because I think whether it is with Paul directly and Paul and Jessica and those devastating, withering arguments, that's not hope in the way that Paul had to succumb to the defeat, the loss, the active mourning and grieving that he is exuding, that is oozing off of him, that he is outright stating when he makes the decisions that he makes, knowing where it is heading. And as we talked about a lot at the time, particularly the way that Chani is deployed in the second film, the despondence and despair to see this thing happening is, I think, really signaling that this is a interrogation and a lament of what happens when people think that you are the Messiah. And if you, for all of the reasons that are explored across these stories, even if you did not want to do this thing, allow yourself to become that, right? To paradise, to the jihad, we'll look at what happens.
So let's talk there. Well, let's talk about, the realities of war, right?
Yes.
The quote we get in the trailer is war feeds on itself, right? And Denis says about this, like, if the first movie was more of a contemplation, like a boy exploring a new world, and the second one being a war movie, this one is more action-packed intense. We get a lot of, like, the horrors of war imagery inside of this trailer.
Yes.
And so, to remind people, part 2 ends with Paul's instructions to Stilgar, which is like, lead them to paradise, right? Jessica says to the Spice Babe Aaliyah inside of her belly at the end of part 2, your brother attacks the great houses, the holy war begins.
Yes.
And then earlier in the film, when Paul is explaining to Chani sort of like why he does not want to go south, right? These visions that he's having, he says, nothing's clear, it's only fragments. I'm in the south, I'm following someone, and it triggers a holy war. Millions and millions of people starving to death because of me. And Gurney said to Paul in that movie, your path leads to war. You know that. So war is coming. What will you do when you feel its breath upon your neck? So here we are, 17 years of war. The person sort of like most embodying that, the character most embodying that, other than sort of Paul saying it expressly, is Javier Bardem as Stilgar, as his like sort of main general inside of this effort. And we see him fighting. And Bardem has talked about like the realities of power and having power for Stilgar. Like, you know, he's the number one believer inside of part 2. And then it's just sort of like, what are the realities of becoming the general for someone who has declared an intergalactic jihad, holy war?
Mm-hmm.
What did you make of the way in which sort of like the horrors of war are depicted here in this first trailer?
I think that this is as elemental to what Frank Herbert is interested in exploring as what happens when we deify people and allow them to take on to use the parlance of the text, the Godhead, right? To exist as a figure of reverence who is worshipped as a deity, not just a man. And when that manifests in direction and guidance and control and worship and violence, it's the most destructive force in the world. This is one of the things about the time jump, whether it's the 17 years of the film or 12 years of the book, that is really, really brilliant, is that like the story is less, we are now going to watch this holy war, a movie about the holy war, and more like, to your point, this has been happening. It has wrecked. The wreckage, it dapples every star. There's a line in the text, Paul looking up at the stars. A man must be half mad to imagine he could rule even a teardrop of that volume. The idea of the emperor, a figure who Paul challenged and reviled and then had to become. Like, this is a tragic story about destruction at scale, right? And so those moments in the trailer where we see like the charred hands reaching up from the muddied ground, like this idea of just a mass grave, and the little glimpses that we get very quickly here, and I'm sure we'll see more in the subsequent trailers. I imagine we'll get 2-3 trailers ahead of the film of different glimpses, like clearly visually displayed to us because of the costuming. This is a different planet. This is a different right? You get a sense very quickly through that visual shorthand of like, right, we're everywhere. This is not just set here on, we're not on just Arrakis or Kaladin. Like the scope of the war is not something that could be contained. You know, there are like, we don't have to say here what they are, but there are like body counts in the book that we get that are in the billions.
Upsetting stats.
It's horrifying.
I would say Paul's number is not, you know, I don't know what his approval rating is, but I would not give him a high approval rating based on those numbers. Anyway.
And like the scarring on the characters' faces in the trailer, I thought the posters were the other thing. I mean, these were some of the best movie posters that I have ever seen. They were, I thought, just like chilling and amazing, but they also are like, oh, everyone's in a pretty rough place and a pretty rough shape. And really has been going through it. And they signal some things that if you're a book reader, you're like, oh boy, wow, they just put that on the trailer. Interesting.
They slapped that right in the trailer, right on the poster. I love that they put that on the poster, actually. But I do think it's interesting. Like, I want to talk about some of the intentional war movie visuals that Denis is deploying here, but also like inside of this trailer, we get shaved head Paul, and then we see like presumably, I would guess, flashback Paul. We get the long curly hair. We get the Atreides uniform. We get the it's not season 1 because he's got the blue spice eyes and Jessica's got the tattoos on her faces. But in that scene with tattoos, he's in his season 1. I said season 1, the first film sort of costume and look. So like that passage of time so back to the imagery of war. You very smartly denoted this idea of like we see people in like very specific cultural garb that indicates to us that this is a different culture that Stilgar and his troops are wiping out. And specifically, we get this sort of like East Asian influence look. We've got some pieces of armor that look more like samurai coated, Chinese coated. It's all like East Asian sort of melange. That's very much like what Denis has done with the Fremen, of just sort of like, let's melange a bunch of cultures into something, which is what Frank Herbert did, frankly, in his text. So I think that like, but I think specifically this sort of like East Asian imagery feeds into when Frank Herbert talked about Dune. He was a Vietnam War correspondent, so we talked a lot about the Vietnam War. He talked a lot about the charismatic leaders that led us into the Vietnam War. When he talked about the dangers of a charismatic leader, his favorite person to talk about was JFK, actually, because he's like, everyone loves JFK, everyone loves Camelot, but, you know, I have quotes here, I don't need to read the full thing, but he was like, but JFK leads us directly into the Vietnam War, and the Vietnam War is one of the worst morasses that we ever found ourselves in. So, like, that was something that was very much on Frank Herbert, Vietnam War correspondent's mind as he is crafting the ongoing Dune narrative. And so when Denis first introduces Baron Harkonnen in Dune Part 1, he very explicitly, and he has given a lot of interviews about this, invoked the image of Marlon Brando as Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now. Like he was from the start using Vietnam War film imagery inside of the story. So when we, inside of this trailer, get Paul Muad'Dib, Atreides, Harkonnen, mopping his bald head, it is both Harkonnen coded and Colonel Kurtz Vietnam War coded. And so I'm just like really interested. I think part of my prep for this movie is going to be to sort of like revisit some of these like iconic Vietnam War films to sort of remind myself of the grammar that Denis is actively engaging with. But like the charred bodies in the mud that you mentioned, there's just like a lot of moments that I was just sort of like, it's very clear what he is trying to depict here. And obviously he has a lot of options outside of the Vietnam War for like global atrocities that have happened. But for what directly inspired Frank Herbert, I think this is like the conflict to look the closest at, which I think is really interesting.
Great flag.
Paul's enemies. The more I fight, the more our enemies fight back. What do you want to say about sort of what is set up here in terms of the grand conspiracy? It's always a little questionable to me what is and is not a book spoiler. So I'm curious, like, what you think we can say about this sort of conspiracy around Paul Atreides.
Good question. I think it's okay to say that this is like just the kind of premise of this slice of the story.
It is the premise. It's the very beginning of the book. It is the premise.
People aren't happy with Paul. Paul's made a lot of enemies and a lot of mistakes. And he knows that, which is just a fascinating place to find this figure. I am so interested to see. So we've been saying for some time since Dune Part 2, you know, Dune Messiah is pretty weird. Not as weird as the later books, but pretty weird. And there are a lot of, and like how ready are people going to be for that? But also how will Denis Villeneuve like present that, because he has a certain style that like roots and grounds even these very strange things. So I just honestly,
like for example, right? He's like, you know what? Yes, is Aaliyah, sort of like a toddler who speaks in full sentences, who stabs the Baron in the book. Yes, we're not going to do that.
Exactly.
Actually, that's a bridge too far.
Exactly.
So we'll figure out how to deploy Aaliyah differently. You know,
perfect example. And like, of course, we have actually the film version of like David Lynch was like, here is this eternal child. And when they will say the abomination, you will understand. So those kinds of... So when I watched this trailer for the first time and saw this... you put sarcophagus in the notes. I think that's I was going to say coffin, but I think that's a better way to this very notable transport. And I was like, holy fuck, Edric's in the movie! Like, this is exciting. A Space and Guild navigator. Is the look going to be exactly like it was in the Lynch film? Clearly not. How will how fish forward versus like humanoid forward will Edric be? We'll find out. I don't know. We'll see. We didn't get a good look.
Let's talk about this. So like we see the sarcophagus, which like some people think is something else, but I agree with you. I think there's a tank that a character named Edric, who is a Space Guild navigator who is started as a human and then just turns out when you marinate yourself in spice goo for a long time, things happen to you. So he's a bit more machine than man now, more fish than man now, perhaps. And so like the question of whether or not Edric was going to be in this movie, especially because there has not been any casting announcement for him, was a question,
right?
And still hasn't. So we do not have we know, for example, of course, that Robert Pattinson is playing Scytale, and I'm very excited for that. I love the character of Scytale in the book, and so that's clear, but Edric has not been cast. So is this going to be like a surprise cool casting, sort of like Anya Taylor-Joy was a surprise as Aaliyah in the second movie? Or is this going to be like, a fish man?
I think
so
there
it doesn't really even matter who's playing him.
At least a chance that Edric is basically there in his container as like a way for somebody to say, Edric being here like blocks Paul's ability to know. Because part of Paul's power is like,
right.
I've seen it all. Kwisatz Haderach, not sure if you've heard, right? And so like a Spacing Guild navigator like Edric is a screen that between Paul's access and awareness to plots against him. I think it's possible that that's sort of like basically alluded to and he's present in that way. Certainly Arpats, one of the greats here as Scytale, I agree, is a thrill. I think the look is amazing. That's another one, though, where I'm interested in like, well, okay, he's a face dancer, right? So the Thalaxu are here. Great. We got a little glimpse of face dancer, Dune prophecy stuff, which like I frankly don't remember very much about that show, including exactly how that all went.
Nor do I care to.
We got some of it. I don't know that will in any way inform how it goes here, but I'm like, you don't cast Robert Pattinson to not have him be the one in the bulk of his scenes, but also
sometimes we'll see.
Yeah, well, so he's a face dancer.
The face dancer for people who haven't read the books and did not watch Dune Prophecy. That's okay. You don't have to. This is like a partial inspo for George R. R. Martin's Faceless Man. So like if you think of Jack and Hagar, that's sort of like what you can expect from Scytale. The Thalaxu shape-shifting assassins, conspirators, deeply hated in the galaxy in general. And so like, but Pattinson talking about his character, right? This is his quote. You can't really tell whose side he's on. That's kind of what makes him interesting. I wouldn't say he's a conventional bad guy as such. He might even be a good guy. Who knows? I will also find out when I see the movie. It's an extremely fun character to play. And the look of it is extraordinary. Whether he needs the movie or his own thing. But so you've got the Bene Gesserit, who have always, abomination, like are not pro Paul. Princess Irulan, who has been in league with the Bene Gesserit from when we first met her. You've got Edric, a Space and Guild navigator, who's like, let the spice flow, baby, and I don't like what Paul's doing. And you've got the Thalaxu Scytale. So you've got a lot of interesting, fun people.
Yeah.
Pretty anti-Paul in general.
I'm really excited for, something that we talked about a lot. We both love both of the first two films. I mean, I love this franchise. I love these movies. I love all of Denis Villeneuve's
masterpieces.
Movies. I think these are incredible. I like two a little bit more than one, but I think they're both great. One of the things we talked about when we covered the first one was how like we thought it was astonishingly good and accomplished, but there was less of the kind of like political theater and political intrigue that is present in the book that we love so much. And this is a great way to, through that framing that you shared in those Villeneuve quotes you shared about how he's thinking about the kind of like genre that this film exists in and the way this part of the story is being deployed. The idea of like the different schools that dominate and drive the course of history in this fictional universe working in concert in this slice of the story, and when can that alignment remain intact against a shared enemy or threat, and when do their ambitions compete with each other is just like a really kind of interesting thing as a premise. I'm so curious to see with the Thalaxu are just really interesting in general as a slice of the story. Very excited about that. Scytale's a great character, I agree. I'm so curious to see how often it is Pattinson's face versus like him shape-shifting and inhabiting another form.
It feels like he got, he's the soundbite that's gone everywhere, right? Is like the fact that when he was making the drama with Zendaya, the A24 movie that they have that's coming out, and he was like, hey, how can I get in one of those Dune movies? And then he got a call about being the Dune movies. But that casting came kind of like a little late. So like that is a question to me of just sort of like if his face is not the main face that is being used for his character, but is like a fun face. Also, as many people on social media have been having a fun time with, they're like, how weird is this voice going to be? Robert Pattinson, lover of a weird voice. How weird does he get to go with Sidetail? The brakes are off on this one.
I can't wait.
Paul's enemies. The more I fight, the more our enemies fight back, and we get in rapid succession. We see the Bene Gesserit, we see Edric's sarcophagus, we see Sidetail. Very exciting. Yeah. This other quote, I'm doing the best I can to protect my family. Here we have Saint Aaliyah of the Knife. Anya Taylor-Joy is here. 17 years older, right? So that's part of the 17-year time jump, I think, is like to believably cast Anya Taylor-Joy as Aaliyah. 17 years is actually young for how old that actress is. So
it's tough to say.
We're doing our best.
She's 12. Yeah.
Yeah.
Challenging.
12-year-old Aaliyah. It's fine. But because once again, when you get if you think being marinated in spice goo in a sarcophagus is tough on you, in the womb is even tougher. So Aaliyah comes out with just like way too much noise going on in her head. She's just not quite, she's got a lot going on. Yeah. But she's very, very loyal to Paul. Paul is like her number one. And so we've got Paul's enemies, but Paul's ally is his sister, Aaliyah. Yeah. And so we get great shots of Anya Taylor-Joy in this trailer. We get her, at war. We get her with like forehead to forehead with Paul in these like really cool lullaby into war chant sort of musicality that goes throughout the trailer. Really, really incredible. Really pulse pounding stuff. Yeah. And then we get, I think the shot of the trailer is Aaliyah at her temple, what is called Aaliyah's Fane. That's Anya Taylor-Joy in these billowing white, incredible, diaphanous robes in the wind in front of this giant temple that's been built for Aaliyah. That is like looks like the mouth of the sandworm behind her. Like just is this like just like another iconic, incredible Dune set piece, Dune prophecy TV show wishes sort of like moment. But it's just like, I mean, it is just one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I don't want, like, again, I don't want to spoil this for people who haven't read the books, but I just think like all of the language around Aaliyah and what you were talking about before, this sort of like myth making around Paul and his sister, Saint Aaliyah of the Knife. I don't know if they'll call her that because she didn't stab the Baron with, as a toddler as she does in the book. So I don't know if she'll get her of the knife designation, but like the Atreides siblings as these like god, king, and queen of this empire. I mean, tough for Princess Irulan that she is not the one deified here.
She's used to tough breaks, that one. Yeah. I just can't wait for all of this. I'm so interested to see how it goes. If people are like, I'm really trying to wrap my mind around what it means to be born with the complete knowledge of everything. A little nugget is that she's like, in the book, I knew my father the way my mother did. Just a little bit of the little Targaryen energy with this stretch of the story. Oh, yeah. Well, in general,
the Harkonnens are.
Oh my god.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the shots, like right next to Aaliyah at her temple at the Fane, are all these pilgrims sort of like looking up, and they're sort of being bathed in water. And there's this quote from the book: Muad'Dib spends water like a madman. Like this idea of just sort of like Arrakis desert planet, and there's water being like rained down on these people. Fascinating shit. All right, Lady Jessica.
My wife.
We see Paul say, "How did Father do this and do it?" And she says, "Your father never started a war." And I'm just like, Lady Jessica,
frankly, outrageous from Lady Jessica.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Frankly, outrageous.
Because I saw Dune Part 1 and Part 2, and we know that Lady Jessica was the one stirring up the prophecy and kicking all this and pushing Paul into this role as a way to protect their family, right? Like that's her mentality, is like, I will engage in this Lisan al-Gaib sort of narrative, and I will put Paul in place here so that we can be protected and we can be in power. But holy shit, it came with a holy war. Fuck. But Jessica being like, well, you started a war, your father didn't, is one of the most outrageous things I've ever heard. And I love this for Lady Jessica because she is nothing if not a complicated bitch. So thank you, Lady Jessica, for that moment in this trailer. I was fascinating. And also, incredible. I just think that, like, to your point of Aaliyah being like, I knew my father like my mother did. The way in which Leto, our beloved Oscar Isaac, is sort of the shadow that looms over the trailer. We'll talk about the Chani-Paul conversation. We see the ducal signet ring being passed from one person to another. And here Jessica and Paul are talking about him. And I just love that as like a, you know, legacy and Paul and all of that is very important to the character, but also as like as a way to connect the third film to the first film. Like this key figure who you have not seen since the opening scenes of the first movie is here in everyone's mind still. And this is all part of one story that we're telling here. I just think is like a really, really clever thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that was very notable as a framing device and a through line and just like a takeaway from the trailer. And I think that these reminders of Leto were deployed very effectively in the second film too. You know, that just still my favorite sequence of any of the films to date, that harrowing Paul speech. You know, it starts with that before he is like, I mean, it starts with the quiet moment of taking out that ducal ring and saying, you know, this was my father's. I am Paul Muad'Dib, Atreides, Duke of Arrakis, right? And so Duke of Arrakis, to root himself, to tie himself to that past as he heads into this unthinkable and yet ordained future, and so seen and understood future, is one of the really, I think, undeniable elements of a family and a man and a connection. Paul is thinking in the book a lot, too, of his grandfather present in the first film, the bull, the story, right? So just the legacy of the Atreides family and where this has gone and is going. But it's just like, this is kind of a stupid thing to say because it's so obvious, but it is like a good like a good reinforcement of the fact that Villeneuve always thought of this as a trilogy. Like this is an installment that was intended to be presented to us in 3 parts. To your point from the beginning of like this story of Paul and this family and this moment in time. That's not always how franchises come to us anymore. You know, sometimes we get something and then it's like, we're going to continue this for fucking ever. Or who knows if you'll get a second one and we decide later you will.
Or there's only one Master and Commander movie, and we're forever like, where's my entire franchise? Yeah. I deserve it. Okay. I showed this trailer to my pal Diana, who is like a huge Dune movie fan, but has not read the books. She's also a huge Jason Momoa fan. And her first comment was, Duncan Idaho's here? Didn't he die?
Indeed.
He sure did, Diana.
Very memorably. Yeah.
Here's what Denise says about Jason Momoa. His return in this movie. Quote, he comes back just at the right moment in the story, and it's a very, very important comeback. Paul is struggling with his identity, and having that strong Atreides figure coming back from the past will have a tremendous impact. I will say that he's fully back. I have nothing more to say about this outside of a book spoiler section. Anything you want to say, Mallory Rubin? Looks great. Happy to have him here.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. We will talk about it a little bit more in the book spoiler section. This is like, sometimes I feel like a real dummy. This is a little bit reminiscent to me, but in a different way of like how I was like, I can't believe they're showing everyone Rocky when they're telling us about Project Hail Mary. And it's like, no, of course they are. They want you to know what the movie's about and who's in it. And that you're going to get this fun
Jason
alien
Momoa's
buddy.
Here.
Yeah. So like, I was like, I wouldn't, I guess there was a part of me that wondered, would it ever actually be confirmed or revealed that he was going to be in this movie? Or would it be, for the people who haven't read the text and don't know, a shock and a surprise? But then I'm like, of course it makes sense to market the movie in part around Jason Momoa being here. So like I'm curious to see if future trailers and just even like the press circuit around the film reveals more.
Make it clear.
Yeah, about what exactly is going on here, or if that will remain under lock and key until the film itself or until our spoiler section in 5 minutes.
Last but not least, our girl Chani. Once again, you're Zendaya. This is where we get if we have a girl, what will we name her? Her name should be Ganima. She would need to be strong like her mother. And what if it's a boy? I would name him Leto. So he would have the wisdom of his grandfather. Chani's role in this film is such a stark departure from the book, as we mentioned in our coverage of part 2. Mm-hmm. Chani is a sort of docile concubine to Paul at the end of the first book and is just sort of like, oh, you're marrying the princess, but you're still going to fuck me? Sounds great. Sign me up. Love that for me, right? So that's a very different place than the pissed off for both political and personal reasons place that we find Chani, looking to catch a ride on a sandworm at the end of Dune Part 2. Yeah. And so even Van called me, I think before the Midnight Boys did their breakdown, he's like, explain to me. And I was like, I don't quite, I have theories, but I don't have clear answers because I don't quite know how they're going to deploy her here. Denny has said that the story, quote, the story of Paul and Chani, of them struggling with their relationship, having the burden and incredible pressure from the world around them, and Paul having to find a way out of the cycle of violence. And there's something about the way their love and the time and the way they are and the way their relationship evolves, that study on the relationship of all characters, that is very personal. So to him, the Chani-Paul love story is crucial, central, spine of this story for him. So how he's going to bend and shape his decision to make Chani, I think, a much more interesting character, and then puts her in a place plot-wise where I don't know how she will play the role that she needs to play at the end of the day here. Yeah. The Zendaya and a perfume ad shots from part 1 are back here in the part 3 trailer. Yeah. It's interesting to reconcile Paul's visions of Chani with the time-hardened reality of her that we get, as you mentioned on the poster, and at the end of the trailer when she's sort of ready with a crisp knife on the back, seems like on the back of a sandworm, ready to have a fight, that's very sick. But that is sort of what's a flashback and what's not. I mean, I don't know, but I'm inclined to use Paul's hair as a marker, though it's possible that he shaves his head midway through. But I'm inclined to think that long curly hair Timothy is a flashback.
Early days.
And so when we get Chani and Paul in the tent talking about their future children, and she's got the blue scarf around her head, which in the book means one thing, but in the movie just meant I'm in a relationship, right? That's her relationship status, is the blue scarf. And then later in part 2, she took the blue scarf off her head and started wrapping it around her wrist. And at the end of the trailer here for part 3, she's got it wrapped filthy and wrapped around her wrist with the crisp knife on the back of the sandworm. So the pristine, clean blue, Chani and Paul in the tent, to me reads as flashback, but I don't know for certain what it's going to be.
I think so as well. I agree with you. I think the hair, we do see Paul with long hair in a suit of war out on the battlefield as well. And so presumably we're going to glimpse many moments in time across the 17 years. And I'm curious to see if that is kind of dappled and dispensed throughout the film, these flashbacks and these moments, in contextually relevant places and moments, or if it's if we're caught up on a stretch of time and then we exist in the contemporary time frame. I'm not sure how that will go, but I agree with you that there's something about the hair to track, and also just their faces, because there's the scarring, just the kind of weather-worn the
tattoos,
the tattoos on the forehead, the age makeup, all of it. So clearly we are moving through time. I'll save my further thoughts on Chani for the spoiler section as well. But yeah, I'm so curious to see how much time we spent in the past versus in the present. I think there's a way to just give us glimpses that really fill in that space quite effectively, but who knows?
Especially with a character who has visions of past and future. You know what I mean? Someone, especially when the spice is involved, we can hop around time anywhere we want to. All right.
Before we get to the books, just a couple of quick things before we get to the book spoiler section. I think just I should have mentioned this when we were just talking about kind of at the opening, what this story is meant to interrogate. And the other thing we love to talk about, obviously, when we talk about Dune and Paul, is prophecy. And this is one of the all-time great prophecy stories. And, there are so many incredible lines across all of the texts about the role of prophecy and the role of vision and carrying this, the oracular vision and the prescience and where it guides people and what the weight of it is and how it is deployed to manipulate and guide the masses. But I think just this idea of like, it went the way it must is like a line from Dune Messiah. Or people call it a power, a gift. It's an affliction. It won't let me leave my life where I found it. Like, this is not a celebration of prophecy, and that is another just true central elemental thing. It's part of why I think we both find it, as people who consume so many stories where prophecy is central, so riveting and interesting to see a story that chips away at the way that can affect and guide you. So that's just really kind of on my mind in the biggest way possible with this movie. I can't wait to see what Villeneuve does with that. The only other thing I'll note before the spoiler section kind of is a blanket thing, and this is often true with adaptations. It's been true with Dune before. There are a number, we talked about Edric already not being, we think in the trailer, but not being like listed on the cast or anything. There are a number of key characters in the story who do not appear to be in the movie. And that's just, maybe we talk about it in a second in a little bit more detail in the spoiler section, but I'm just kind of like, that's on my mind with like, who will be compressed? You know, will certain characters who are in the story just inherit storylines that belong to other figures and stand in for them? Will certain aspects of the story be eliminated? Will they be moved to other figures? You know, there are meaningful people and drivers of the plot who are just, I don't think, in the movie. So that's interesting. Maybe they will be revealed at a certain point to be in the movie, but currently it looks like some major characters are not in the movie. So that's fascinating.
I doubt it. Like, Denis has proven himself as someone who's like willing to make large adaptive changes in the first two movies. So I am inclined to think that like he especially with something that is as like murky in some places as Dune Messiah, I think he's just sort of like, let's, and I trust him.
Yeah,
you know,
like
too. There's a lot of people who make big adaptive changes where I'm like, come on, buddy, the source material rules.
Yes.
But Denis has absolutely proven himself to understand what is at the core and the heart of the messaging of this story. And I feel like really good about whatever he wants to do.
I agree. I think there's a way certainly here to drive the spirit of it and maintain the spirit of it while putting, you know, this thing that someone did here with this person. I'm very intrigued, but I agree. I'm confident.
Now it's time for book spoilers. It's not going to be like it's not going to be a huge, lengthy section, but we just wanted to like touch on a few things. So book spoilers, get the heck out of here if you don't want to learn some things. There's some big things to talk about. Yes. So bye.
Did you leave?
Bye. All right. So I have a couple things listed here, but do you want to start with what you were alluding to, like the characters who are missing that you're sort of have some questions about?
There are a bunch, obviously, but Korba and Bijaz in particular not being in the story is fascinating, given I think the Fremen betrayal, like the idea of the conspiracy, but also the people who are turning against Paul, like the inside the house aspect of Paul. You know, and ultimately the story ends with the Fremen embracing Paul and protecting his children. And, you know, when he wanders off into the desert, right, it is like a cementing actually of his place among those people. But there are a lot of rocky bits of business along the way. And I think like Korba as a figure who and the treachery takes form in so many different places and ways, but I'm curious if that is, maybe this can connect to some of the Chani talk. I think at the end of the Dune Part 2, like we did a little spoiler section at the end of the Part 2 movie pod, and I think we were like, wait, so is like Chani gonna like turn on Paul? Is that a thing that's gonna happen? Which, as you noted, is not what happens in the book. But like, so does she actually absorb some of the Fremen treachery plot? Does Stilgar absorb some of it, or does it go to Chani? Like, where do you think that is going?
I think it could be both, and I really like this idea of like Chani as a sort of like to put a more personal face on the side of the Fremen rebellion, whether or not she will like reconcile with Paul at some point. But this brings me to the 17 years later question and the children, right? Because so Chani needs to be in Paul's life for the book to work because they have children who are important for the future of the story, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
This was a common theory at the end of Part 2, and I am all the more convinced that she was already pregnant at the end of Part 2 because they have cast Nicole Wolf Momoa, Jason Momoa's kid, and Ida Brooke as
the twins.
Paul and Chani's kids, and they are 16-ish years old.
Yes.
So if I like this idea that she's had the kids in secrecy and Paul does not know that they exist, and they are already like teenagers out in the world, like brought up with the Fremen or something like that. Do you think that that's possible?
I would
no.
Maybe. I think anything's possible, and you always introduce theories that I have never even considered that intrigue me. I would have a hard time thinking about how that would work because so much of Paul's there's everything with the Holy War with the visions and Paul's role in it, but there's so much of the vision-centric stretch of the Dune Messiah plot is driven around the children and Chani's death and dying. Right, and then there's like oh shit, we had two of them? Twist. And so he doesn't see everything, and maybe that's enough of a... That is, to your larger point, I think the kind of little crack that Villeneuve is interested in taking and blowing open, being oh, maybe if Paul didn't know that there was a second baby and is surprised by that in the book, is there enough there for me to play with to say, could he be surprised about both of them? There is another
Skywalker.
But I guess, I don't know, he's perseverating over... And also the fact that he is, his awareness of them feels important to me because you know what? I'm in real time, I'm twisting myself into a pretzel here because I was going to say, his awareness of them feels crucial because of the weight of that, right? That he's he knows Chani's going to die in childbirth. And it is when he gets to the end and he's do
you think it's possible he doesn't want to do this because George Lucas lifted that and gave it to Anakin and Padme, and then Denis I don't want to run back Anakin and Padme, even though they were inspired
it's
by
entirely possible.
Paul and Chani.
Maybe.
I don't think he wants to have his version of Chani die in childbirth.
That's agree. What I think. I'm with you that I agree. I'm with you that I think he is going to change that. She's not going to die. I actually think that would be quite odd and surprising if that was maintained from text to screen based on the other changes. I also agree with you. It seems most likely to me. I think it's possible that the casting to your Children of Dune incorporation point is basically at the end, we see these grown kids as a little flash to the future of the 100%. Story. Could be that.
That's possible. That it's them at the end or them in visions or something like that, that they are babies in this.
Yes.
And then are teens in the very end or something like that.
But
I think this idea
that they're there.
Already born.
I like that too. I think it feels to me like the possibility of, based on the way they're presented in the trailer, talking about that she's pregnant already or right away and that they have the kids. The part that I'm having a harder time wrapping my mind around is him not knowing. I don't know that would... And the other reason that I can't wrap my mind around that, though, again, that would be really interesting, is because so much of the friction with Irulan is that she is I am supposed to let me birth your heir, and he won't, right? And he won't take her into his bed, and
he won't fuck her, and and then she's feeding, but
she's giving Chani the contraception. I don't mind her having a
different motivation if let's just say he doesn't want to have sex with her anyway.
Sure.
Not just not because I prefer my concubine, but I was in love with someone else and this is a purely political marriage. I don't want to have sex with you. I don't want.
Oh no, for sure. I think from the Irulan perspective, that could go all sorts of ways. I just mean more Paul not knowing about the kids. I kind of like him. He's so protective of his relationship with Chani. Now, if he has squandered that, and one of the costs is not knowing actually about this family, that would be kind of interesting to mine. But the idea that he is this is just this thing that, I will love you for as long as I breathe, that he said in the second movie, knowing and needing to protect her and them from the forces inside the
He's so
house
protective of her, but that was a different Chani. You know what I mean? I believe in the Paul and Chani love story. I believe that even if she is on the Fremen opposition, has had his kids in secret, they're 16 or 17 or whatever. Even if all of that is true, I still think there's going to be some kind of Paul and Chani reconciliation, whether that's him again, this is just me wildly theorizing, whether that's him discovering that the kids exist, or and anything like that, her discovering that he has been protecting them somehow, or but here's a hole in my theory, which is that some people interpreted the way that Zendaya talks about Florence Pugh in part 3 as indicating that they have several scenes together. And that would mean that Chani would have to be at the palace in theory or whatever. So, but I read those quotes and I don't know that I have the same interpretation. I think she was just talking about how great Florence Pugh is in the movie.
In general, well, I wonder if these ideas could all connect, because I'm struggling because Paul's awareness of the pregnancy and of the offspring is so central to the story. I'm struggling to think about him not being aware of that. However, to the earlier point of like Edric and blocking Paul's awareness of the conspiracy, and that is so central, right? If Chani is in cahoots, if Chani is a part of the conspiracy, then in theory there could be a shielding. That could be a way to, because I don't see how he wouldn't know otherwise. But if she's part of the conspiracy and has that proximity to Edric, just like Irulan goes to back to the palace in the books and is like, but he does know. He knows something's up. Yeah, it's fascinating. So I don't know what changes he's going to make.
The quote in the trailer, I'm doing the best I can to protect my family, which I deployed in the section where we talk about Aaliyah. But like, obviously that could also be him talking about Chani or talking about the kids or whatever the case may be. But okay. So that's the Chani question. Again, I don't know the answer, but
will we still get to see him see through the eyes of a newborn infant in his cradle after he's been blinded? I hope so.
One can only hope. Before we get to the blinding, let's talk about Golas. So in case you're listening to this and you haven't read the book, Duncan, Idaho. This is not Duncan, Idaho, though it also is. It's a character called Hayt, Hayt. And he's what's known as a Gola, which is essentially like a clone. And basically, as part of this conspiracy against Paul, he has been created to, in a sort of Manchurian Candidate-esque way, to sort of infiltrate the Atreides family and then, when triggered, take Paul out. And also that his presence, his very presence there is meant to confuse, confound, emotionally compromise both Paul and Aaliyah inside of this world.
Talk about it.
So,
I mean, are they going to do that? Are they going to do the
is that why she's
Duncan
17?
Aaliyah romance?
I don't know. I don't know. Great question.
Here's something I feel confident they won't do: is Aaliyah training in the nude and then Paul walking in and being like, "What's up?"
Pretty great. Pretty great. So
crazy.
That's not, but that is and isn't Duncan, Idaho. We do get a shot in the trailer of Paul and Duncan fighting, and I'm pretty in the like sparring, and I'm pretty sure that this is the moment in the book where basically the Gola that is Hayt, Hayt, breaks through his programming. Like he's got this contradicting, there's like the love that Duncan, Idaho, that is molecularly implanted into the DNA of Duncan, Idaho, and the love he has for Paul versus the instructions that he has been given to hurt Paul. And basically he overcomes his Manchurian Candidate-esque programming and like is the first Gola in history to sort of like break out of that control. So that is, again, we talked about Golas a bit when we covered Dune Prophecy, a show that I would prefer to forget, but that's what's going on here. This is a clone. Will they say that in the media tour? I don't know. Or will they continue to play coy? It's a great question.
I'm so interested to see.
I should say, sort of to go back to once again, parsing media appearances for clues, going back to the children question. At the premiere of the trailer, Zendaya was asked if Chani and Paul are having kids in the film, and she avoided answering the question by laughing and pointing at Villeneuve and saying, "Over to you, director." So, like,
but then the whole trailer is about like the kids they're gonna have. It's hard to make movies in the internet era. I don't envy anyone who has to go out and do these press tours and not. How would they know what they can say or not? It's wild. I am thrilled that we're in the Gola, Hayt, Duncan era. And this is like another one where I'm curious to see, especially because a character like, if Bijaz is not in the movie, is there another path? Like, are they interested in the movie in kind of examining and preserving the last little phase of the Gola plot, which is like, okay, Hayt tapped back into Duncan and, Paul. Let me back up. One of the great things about just the presence of the Gola period is that from the beginning, right away, it's just like out on Front Street. Are you here to kill me? Is that why they did this thing? Right? You must surely you are here to take me down. And that Hayt is kind of like, you probably should like not let me be around you. You should get rid of me. But like Paul it's the face of his best friend. So like he wants to be near him. And this kind of constant quagmire of contradictions and dissonance is like so riveting. They're all acknowledging it constantly. Aaliyah and Hate have a very interesting draw to each other and relationship, but there's that element too, because you noted earlier, like Aaliyah and Paul, it's like, you're my number one, so she wants to protect him. They're all afraid of what Hate might do. And so when you build toward that moment of Paul, like, who has foreseen so much, and yet there are moments in even his visions as they're unfurling in real time in front of him where he's like, wait, that you weren't here. You weren't here. Oh, it's all happening. It's here. You said that line, you said that word, but these little things are different. And so there are these aspects of him, even though he is certain that he's marching toward the path that he has seen laid out in front of him, where he's like, could it go a different way? And then at the end, of course, it's like, should I have ensured it went a different way? Hate, like, just something like him saying young master, and Paul's like, wait, you called me something Duncan would have called me. Like, is it you, Duncan? Is it you? And so one of the things I'm curious to see if Villeneuve is interested in, is it just about having him here to go for the kill move, and then he's pulled out of the Thalaxu, I'm your weapon, I'm your pawn, coding and programming, and it just becomes Duncan again, and he and Paul are on each other's side, and that's a win for them and a loss for everyone else, and that's where it ends in the movie? Or do they then do the other element of it of like, part of the plot, right? Part of the Thalaxu plot, part of what they're interested in is no matter what, they have a contingency. If this is what happens, they didn't lose from their perspective. They won because it proves that, to your point, the first goal in history who actually like communed again with his prior form, then they can do that, right? So it's like, okay, I'm good. You can just keep making me again, and I'm never at jeopardy. If he had killed Paul, then their plan is to just go to Alea and say, do you want us to make a Gola out of Paul? Right? They offer to Paul, they're like, do you want us to make your beloved a Gola? And Paul is, of course, tempted because how could he not be? But then also he knows that if he does that, he'll be in their debt forever and they'll control him. So, like, I'm curious if that aspect of the Gola plot is something that is going to be explored at all, or if it really will just be, you're wearing the face of my best friend, but I know you're here to kill me, and then you tried to, and then you didn't, which would be still pretty great in the movie and probably more contained.
I think also if Chani is like a sort of mirror character to that, if Chani is the face of the Fremen revolution or anything like that, or as part of the conspiracy, this idea of like Villeneuve really underlining their love story and just sort of like what can transcend or what can reach, a Paul who's gone to the lengths that he's gone to, and can he return to himself in some way because of the love of a Duncan Idaho or a Chani or whatever the case may be.
Right.
Last but not least, let's talk about stone burning. So,
dude, so they just tweeted out the blindness on the poster. They just did it.
Yeah. I don't think people know what they're looking at if they don't know what they're looking at. But like he's got a bunch of scarring around his eyes in the poster, which is like very cool.
Yeah.
In the trailer, we get this like flash of light, which everyone is like, okay, that's the moment, the stone burner moment that Paul Atreides loses his sight.
Yeah.
But then again, if you're listening to the spoiler section, but you haven't read the book, don't worry, because of his fucking like vision abilities, he's like, you don't have to get rid of me. I can still see everything because I got the spice mind. Here's a quote from the book. As he looked at the troopers beginning to stand up around him, the mist on Paul's eyes faded into darkness. He summoned up his oracular vision of these moments, then turned and strode along the track that, capital T, time had carved for him, fitting himself into the vision so tightly that it could not escape. He felt himself grow aware of this place as a multitudinous possession, reality welded to prediction. I mean,
it's great shit.
End quote. Frank Herbert cooking. But this idea of like what he sees now is what he has seen. And so it's sort of like, to your point, that idea of like prediction and prophecy becoming reality because it's the only sight he has left because he has lost his physical sight. We're going to be feasting. I'm very excited for how this is depicted visually by Denis Villeneuve. Really, really great opportunity for all of that. But yeah, that's just in the trailer and on the poster if you know what you're looking for.
Do you think they're going to move this up? This is like pretty late in the book, the stone burner sequence. I wonder if this will happen sooner.
I don't, maybe, but that scarring that we see on the poster is not on him anywhere else in the trailer. True. So I don't know if that
maybe it's like the start of the third act or something. That would feel right. Yeah. I can't wait for this movie.
I'm so excited. Okay, so basically the structure of the pod today was like moving through layers of enthusiasm, and it's like Daredevil born again, Spider-Man, brand new day,
just
Dune.
It's a wormhole through space, Spidey, Dune.
Dude, I'm so excited. All
Me
right.
too.
I had so much fun like looking at this Dune trailer and thinking about and like going into the book for quotes and stuff like that. Just like, this is our shit. I'm so excited. Anything else you want to say before we call it a day?
No, I just can't wait. I mean, we celebrated in the hype draft like how many things we had to look forward to. And will everything be great? Who knows? But Project Hail Mary being good really felt like a, you know what? It is in fact going to be our year kind of signal. So
it might be.
I can't wait. I'm thrilled.
What is the thing you have the most question marks about right now, like Avengers Doomsday? Is that
in terms of whether it's actually good? Oh boy. You know, I do like everyone have some Mando Grogu questions, so I really hope that it's fun. I
hope that for
Doomsday will be good, but I don't know. Why didn't they just move that a few weeks? What an own goal. Jesus.
What a mess. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
To our Avengers who have assembled here today, to CT, to Jake Cornett, to Carlos Chiriboga, to Arjuna Ramgopowell, to Jomi Adeniran, to Mallory Rubin,
Joanna Robinson,
and to me. And
Indeed.
We'll see you next week. Bye.